Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Uncovering Anomalies podcast.
All
This
right.
is episode 106, and we are so thankful for all of you who are listening. Today is a very special episode.
Absolutely.
Joining me, as always, is I Have a Need to Know, Adam.
Hey, everybody.
And I am Topher It All. And
Wow.
joining us, our very special guest, Bruce Fenton.
Welcome, Bruce.
Hold for applause.
Thank you very much for having me.
We are so thankful that you are joining us. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. You're our first professional guest. It's amazing.
Well, it was nice to be the first.
Yeah, definitely an honor to have you on the show. Well-known author. I mean, the book that we'll be talking about today is Exogenesis, Hybrid Humans, and so Erik von Daniken wrote a foreword in that book. And how does that happen? Did he come by the book somehow, and then, or did you send him the book, and then he decided to do a foreword?
Yeah, actually, my agent managed to arrange that because he's also the agent for Erik and for a few other people in the kind of UFO and alien space, as it happens. So he actually supplied the book to Erik to have a look at, and and thankfully Erik was happy to do the forward for it, which was great.
Yeah, and Exogenesis is not your first book. You have written books before, and you do co-author with your wife Daniela, correct?
That's right. So I mean, I'll be honest, I do most of the writing, but she contributes some of the information to the books. The previous book was The Forgotten Exodus, the Into Africa Theory of Human Evolution. Which also, that one got a forward from Graham Hancock, which was super cool. So
amazing.
I was really stoked because both of them are names I knew from when I was much younger and would have never expected to have a book with their names on. So that was really cool.
Absolutely.
I mean, your research is amazing, and the way you put it together is just anyone can understand it. Even when you go into the scientific details of it, which you understand a lot, even in Exogenesis, when you talk about the DNA, that goes really deep into the science, but you present it in a very palpable way.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to make it accessible. I mean, it's, as you can appreciate, when you go to read an academic paper on, a genetic study or something, obviously it's aimed at a technical audience who all follow that topic. So communicating that across to the wider public is a skill in itself. So I mean, I certainly aim to always improve on that and to do my best with that, because I know it's tricky.
Yeah, and so how did you and Daniela meet? I think that's such a cool relationship to have. And even with Topher and I were talking this off stage, and he was saying, like, I would love to meet someone that's into this like me.
So, I mean, so I've dated at least 2.5 women, throughout my life, and every time I bring up the alien and UFO, like my interest in that, they seem to be like, oh okay. So I'm really looking for someone who shares the same interests as I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I know that many years ago, before I connected with Daniel, I'd always sort of said to my parents that I could only really see myself having a kind of committed long-term relationship with someone that was at least shared in an interest in, let's say fringe topics, the paranormal, or somewhere in that domain. They didn't have to like all the same things or agree on all of them, but I couldn't really imagine having someone there who every time you brought up these topics, like, okay, darling, so there has to be able to have some kind of connection over these kind of things you have either a passion for, or that you feel a part of your own worldview and cosmology, right? Otherwise you're kind of two people sharing a house but living in two different realities,
right?
I mean, which to me is the strain that could put on a relationship potentially is huge eventually, can eat away at you. So I think it is important that you have some of those connections, if it's important to yourself, obviously. If it's just a kind of a hobby pastime, like the occasional fishing of someone who likes a little bit of fishing, but they're not an avid fisherman. You know, it's that kind of. So it depends on where you're at with a topic. Obviously, if these things become core to your life, then I think you would need to have some reflection of that in a life partner. Like, yes, I'm fortunate in that Danielle and myself actually met through both of us working on a professional intuitive website, which you may know. And so we were both on at the same time. She actually hired me for a reading. So I'm not the world's best card reader, but I was, working as a card reader for a little while. And so she had this reading, and she liked it, and we ended up talking and becoming sort of friends as well as kind of colleagues on that site. And it was only many years later that we actually physically met. She got me a job in Spain after my marriage broke down, my business went belly up. I had a lot of life change stuff, and she got me a job in Spain. So we had never met before that, just friends online, and then got to know each other and ended up together in a relationship. But yeah, so we met through a connection in the kind of the psychic world. So we already had that foundation, and she'd had a lot of her own strange experiences, including things that relate to UFOs and alien contacts and a whole massive gamut of strangeness. So there's not much in my research and my interest that she hasn't got some link to, so that definitely has made things, I think, more smooth.
Yeah, and you do talk about in the book, right, about she had past life experiences, which I thought was really amazing how she's able to do that. Now, do you have the same kind of abilities of her? Are you connected psychically with her? I mean, that happens anyway in marriages, I think, naturally.
Sure. Yeah, lesser so. She's in the same way that in the sports world, I might be in the Sunday league football, she'd be playing in the Premiership, so that's the kind of difference. So she's had a lifelong set of sort of particularly psychic experiences from toddler age onwards. She has memories of being in the cot and going out of body and flying around the room, seeing entities in the room, as a toddler. So from then on, and spirit people, as she got older, connecting with spirit people. So she's had that all the way through. And on top of that, connections with beings, that would be referred to as kind of ascended masters or non-humans. And really her story is fascinating. And I do encourage her to speak a bit more about it, because she'd probably be what is termed a kind of a high level experiencer, that she's had, really powerful experiences and past life memories. And I mean, obviously in the book I talk just a little bit about her journeys, because she had a set of kind of shamanic journeys that were spontaneous, but seemed to involve some kind of intelligence. The initial journey, she found herself on what we now think could have been a kind of a saucer, because she found herself in a domed space, right? With teal kind of walls, but they were transparent, and through them she could see stars. So it was only much later she thought, actually, this domed space could have been a translucent saucer, and that there was all sorts of human-like beings on there that were having a conversation about Earth, its past, its future. And then she had a follow-on series of journeys where she basically would find herself fully immersed in the experience of being this Mayan princess living in Palenque in Mexico in the 7th century, who was a daughter of Lord Hancock, who's the famous, the guy on the lid in Erik von Daniken's book.
Yeah.
Right. That's Hancock. So she had all of these journeys, and it was over a year, where maybe 2-3 times a night she would basically go to bed and find herself pulled back into this experience. So like living a whole other life. And
fascinating.
I will tell you just briefly, because I know it's in a way it's a funny part of the book, because it's kind of, it doesn't flow with the rest of the book, but I included it just because it's so kind of amazing. And I know that a lot of people probably look and they think that's so woo, it's so strange, but she would see beings that were there, that underneath this city there was a kind of a catacombs with human-like alien beings, and then others that were greys and tall greys, and all of the kind of the classical beings, some that looked more reptilian, but they were all underneath this city. And there was crystal skulls, there was emerald tablets, there was all these other things that you've heard about in kind of mystery topics are in this city, like libraries of knowledge and really strange stuff. Now, obviously, I can't say whether those are real places and these are real experiences, but
Right.
she experienced them as though it was real. So if
Right.
you put on your headset and you enter a virtual world and you're experiencing it all, it's kind of like that, like ultra amazing, holographic 3D virtual world, whatever, who knows, but that's how she experienced it. So very very full on.
And these were like you said, these were dreams, right? And these were not meditations that she'll do or shamanic journeys.
Not deliberately so, no. I mean, so she would pass out. The first time she was in quite a lot of pain, and she said actually it was like she felt that her whole body had been pulled apart to atoms and then pulled through the wall of the house. And so that's how I found. She assumed she had died, and then was I guess, reconstituted in this space. And again, thought she was dead until until the next day, and she came back and was in her body again. But he said it really was, really like a painful, kind of horrible entrance into it. But the other times, mostly be either she fell asleep or would pass out, and then I would hear her talking, sometimes in Mayan as well.
Wow!
But she'd be talking while she was unconscious, and so I knew she was having, I'd catch one side of a conversation. But she'd obviously be having a conversation with somebody else somewhere, and she, other times she had drawing on the wall, like unconscious, but drawing on the wall with her finger, like symbols, like I assume Mayan symbols and stuff. So it was very strange. I say it's certainly the strangest year of my life in terms of I had that going on. I was also involved with attacking the book. At the same time, I was involved with investigating a lost city site in the Amazon jungle. So I had that going on because that again was a strange connection where we were going to meet with a local shaman. And this is we're in Ecuador. I should clarify that,
cool.
Though I went to Spain with her, after a couple of months, we then end up going to Ecuador where she has family, right? And so all of these events are happening there. And so obviously in Ecuador is more of a shamanic kind of culture. We were meeting with a shaman to do some like work that I needed to do because I was having some paranormal issues, problems going on, quite negative stuff. And this person was like, well, okay, meet up, but at the same time there's another couple in the same town, and like if we can all meet together it's easier because we're going to come from somewhere else, we're going to meet you and Daniela, and if we can meet the others at the same time it just makes our lives easier. So we're like, yeah, that's fine. And it turned out the other couple, the guy who was an ex-colonel in the army, he'd just come back from this kind of adventure in the Amazon jungle where they believed they'd found a lost city of giants.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. You got to think I've been in Ecuador for maybe like at this point less than a month.
Wow.
And I'm now weirdly in this in this shaman's house meeting with a guy who's just come back from a supposed lost city of giants in the Amazon jungle. So it's not lost on me that I'm probably the only ancient mysteries researcher in 1,000 miles kind of thing.
You're right.
Certainly English speaking, and I just happened to be there. So I got kind of pulled into that situation and meeting lots of people, investigating it. 2 treks there, met with the government of Ecuador about this, all sorts of stuff. So we had that going on the same year that Daniela is having those journeys, and I'm also having this other situation, which I won't go too much into, but paranormal events are happening around.
Yeah. So was it more negative paranormal events that were happening?
Extremely negative, like a horror movie. Absolutely, like living in a horror movie. So that had already been going on, and I won't do too much, but I can tell you, there was a lot of stuff. I went to we contacted. Well, we were put in contact with what was supposed to be the best worker of kind of dispelling negative energy, curse breaking, all of that kind of stuff that was in the city. And so we were put in contact with them, and apparently they began work on my case. And then we were told, they contacted and we were told that they stopped because they'd suffered a paralysis whilst trying to help me, and that they no longer wanted to work on my case.
Whoa,
and,
what kind of...
Yeah, apparently their arm or part of their body became paralyzed, and so they took that as that it was too much, it was too strong what was being sent. Another witch who was supposed to be helping me, she said she'd never encountered such strong negative energies and was surprised I was alive at that point.
That's crazy.
It is
Was
like a horror movie.
was there?
Well,
Do you know where it started from? I mean, was like a hitchhiker event or something?
no, I know where it started from. Yeah, it was a
Okay.
personal vendetta against me.
Oh, all right.
Wow.
Okay. Oh,
From a group, and not singular. It was a singular person's vendetta, but there was a group of people, and it was being sent from an Asian country by people that are very well versed in these things, who had things of mine, personal stuff they'd taken, all sorts of stuff to use in ritual magic. So it was, and much people say, oh, they don't believe that stuff. It's, it only happens if you believe it. And you hear all these things, but I can tell you, I'd never considered those things as being, something to worry about.
right.
Despite having an acceptance of, Reiki and distance healing, you always think of it as the good side of that, right? That, someone could sit and pray for you, and you hear about, people having these miraculous healings. But unfortunately, if someone can project good energy to you, if you accept that premise, then of course they can also project negative intentions and energy to you. So the two things are unfortunately hand in hand. So that was, so it was a really strange year. So when we talk about that, I'm having this negative going on. So I'm seeing healers, shamans, different kinds of experts in these things. At the same time, I'm also investigating a lost city in the Amazon jungle, meeting the government, doing all that. And my partner is at night being taken to the 7th century to Palenque with an underground full of aliens. So, I mean, if you...
It's like a movie.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's like different movies put in together. It's like one of them would be enough on its own, but you're like living in where someone has really jumped the shark in the production. They've said, why not just throw everything in?
Yeah, right.
It's like that. It's so absurd. You're like, well, there's no need for all of this because it's enough with just one of these plot lines, right? But now, obviously, I could say in hindsight that all of these strange things are part of the journey that leads me on to the book. That these are, I would say, at least some of it is the cost of knowledge. That if you want to learn profound things, if you look at the kind of the belief systems around the idea of learning hidden truths, there's often a kind of a cost. It's like the Arthur's journey for the Grail type thing, that there's a lot of costs of that journey, and there's people die, and there's all sorts of stuff that happens for them to get the Grail, right? That applies in a lot of myth and legend. We know that there's usually the querent has a price to pay to get the hidden thing. And for me, I can look back and say, okay, well, that year definitely was to do with that cost, and for both of us, obviously, it's very stressful stuff for Daniela as well. You can imagine, you've got
you would definitely be nudged.
Problems and
you would definitely be nudged by something, to go this path. I mean, it's crazy that colonel was there too. That was, that came from finding that lost city, which is just mind blowing. And then working with the government as well, and then Daniela having that. But you had an experience too, right? I remember you wrote in the book.
Well, I mean, this hasn't come out of nowhere, because if you backtrack a bit, so this is the beginning of 2012. This stuff's happening, but at the end of 2011, in November 2011, just this kind of after the my old business has gone, my ex has got, all that stuff's gone. I'm now just living in a friend's bedroom, it basically in a house in the woods. Actually, the only twist is actually I live in a house in the woods, and it's just opposite the hospice where George Orwell was when he was writing 1984. Actually, which is
wow.
So which is kind of wild. But so literally the building is just opposite from us in the woods. But it's actually an old mental hospital that I'm living in, like a creepy old mental hospital that's being converted into a house in these woods opposite. So I mean, my life's full of these are just strange things. So there was some sort of paranormal things happening there as well. But at the time that I was there, I took this trip to Egypt. And so around November 11. So I thought, very powerful kind of, numerology, maybe looking for a transformative experience. My life has obviously gone through this massive shift. So I take this opportunity to kind of go and start a new direction. But it's whilst I'm in Egypt that this kind of story really begins, because a friend of mine is out there at the same time, Richard Gabriel, he's a researcher on ancient Egypt, got a book on the topic, Echoes from the Chamber. And so he knows Egypt very well. And it just happens he's going at the same time. I didn't plan this. I found out after I've already got the tickets. He says, "Oh, actually, I'm going to be there. We can meet up." And so again, this is prestigious because he knows all these places that I would not know. And so he ends up taking me to a site called Abu Ghurab. And
it sounds like the one in Iraq, right? Abu Ghurab.
Ghraib.
Yeah,
it sounds similar, but not the same
yeah.
one. No.
So okay, yeah.
This is a dilapidated sun temple that's within sight of the Great Pyramid in the desert.
Okay.
And it's considered to be potentially one of the very oldest kind of special sites in that complex, especially super old. Now, there's a few things I didn't know about it at the time, which I now know, is that, for example, the researcher Wayne Herschel, he says it's actually represents one of the stars of the Pleiades on the ground, and that, if you do the as above, so below, that there's a star map. Right, if you're a Giza, my friend sort of details this in his work. So you've got obviously the temple, you've got the pyramids as Orion, you've got a number of temples that are the Pleiades, and you've got other stars that are mapped. So you can almost take the sky and look at the ground and say, well, if I'm missing a star, there's probably a sacred site or a megalith that we haven't found, because all of them seem to be marked by some kind of site on the ground, all the key important stars that they were interested in. Right, so this site represents one of the stars of the Pleiades. Seems right. And so while we were there, my two friends who were there, they kind of spontaneously start this invocation of open the Stargate. Right, and there's a platform there. It's called the Hotep platform. It's an alabaster square with an alabaster kind of circular middle. You can see the pictures. Anyone who wants to look it up, they can see pictures of this. And so I joined in with this, and I'd asked Daniela to kind of connect intuitively from where she was, because I felt that was important. And so the four of us be connected into that. And so after we'd done that, I had this kind of intuitive feeling. It's very strange, but basically I was talking to the stars of the Pleiades, like, looking up and talking like there was somebody there. Like, and I'm not really person who had any background in sort of new agey ideas of Syrians and Pleiadians and so I was aware of that stuff. It's never been something I'd been drawn to, but I did find myself talking to the stars as though there was someone there saying, why have you left us here? Why don't you help the planet? Why don't you come and it's a mess here, that kind of thing. Now, there was a sense that, something might happen. You think, oh, and you look around, is there a spaceship or something? But no, there was nothing like that. So I carried on the rest of my time in Egypt, did lots of other interesting things, went underground into tunnel systems I didn't know existed, went in the coffer of the Great Pyramid and chanted in there and had experiences there. Like, it's a lot of amazing stuff. But really, where this connects in is that about 2 months later is when I'm now in Ecuador with Daniela. And this is when these experiences for her begin. And so, obviously, I've since had the realization, we basically called these beings, and that then they answered. So there was this gap of about 2 months where there was nothing really obvious, and then they turned up. And so it wasn't completely out of nowhere. It was kind of we had invited.
You invited,
without fully comprehending what that meant. But I had invited that contact, and they did later say the reason why they spoke to her was because she was the more powerful, intuitive of the two of us, and so that they decided it was better to connect with her.
And they started telling her the stories, I guess, where the history comes from.
Yeah, I mean, some of it through that, but then the funny thing is the way it played out was actually then, because I wrote a book, 2012 Rising, The Last Soul King, which I published in 2012. So then that book, someone who read it said, well, we know these other people, these two researchers in Australia that have a kind of connecting story about the Pleiadians, and that their names are Stephen and Evan Strong. Now, some people be familiar with them. They've also been on Ancient Aliens, and they've got a number of books online and their own projects. So we kind of connected with them and ended up collaborating on a book called Ancient Aliens in Australia, which now is out of print. But they kind of also connected me to a lady called Valerie Barrow. Of course, if you've read the book, anyone who's read the book will know that in Exogenesis I talk about Valerie Barrow because she wrote a book called Al Chiringa, When the First Ancestors Were Created. And it's the narrative in that book that kind of reveals this kind of story of the Pleiadian visitation in deep prehistory. And so that's where it kind of, so it was through this kind of flow of events. So though, my my partner's having these connections with these beings, and she's getting some level of information, but actually, yeah, it really kind of goes deep dives after we have this connection made through someone else on Stephen, and then obviously through Stephen and Evan onto Valerie, and then into her work. And that's where we encounter the narrative of a visitation in deep prehistory.
So Valerie, so you're saying Valerie read, because Valerie wrote her own book, right? And
yes.
So did you read her book first before going to go see her?
So after Stephen and Evan made us aware of the of her book, I read that, realized that that there was something really interesting here, and that I felt a connection to this. And again, going a little bit into, I'm not sure if there's a,
no,
but with a little bit of strangeness there, because we also had, there was a kind of, I had an event years before that, basically, and I talk about this in the book, that I'd had a shamanic journey, and that was probably 2002, something like that. And during this shamanic journey, I'd had a little slice of an experience where I had become this being, this non-human being, and it looked humanoid, but had a kind of bluish skin, and was piloting a craft. It looked like flying towards Earth, that there was a sense of there being other beings, I couldn't see, and that there'd been some kind of destructive event, and a load of other allied beings had been kind of killed in space somewhere. And so it was a fairly short but really immersive experience, and then it just ended and it moved on to somewhere else, other things that were happening, right?
And so when you do these shamanic events, are there any substances involved, or is this totally meditative states?
No, this was a shamanic experience using something called Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds.
Okay.
So they're not as super well known as like ayahuasca or smoking DMT and that kind of thing. But they are an LSA containing seed that is used, my understanding is, by Hawaiian traditions.
Very cool.
So they're a little bit more niche.
Definitely niche.
And so it was during that, so it was during that experience that I had it. But there were, to be honest, the other things that happened during the journey were kind of more profound. There was like experience of, some kind of divine presence or some higher presence. There was an experience of, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, the 3 Waves of Volunteers.
No, I'm not. 3 Waves of Volunteers
by Dolores Cannon. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she's kind of a past life researcher, past life therapist, and but in her book she talks about these beings all getting a call to come to Earth and to incarnate here because of changes that are coming. Well, part of this experience I had in the shamanic experience was a sort of download that there'd been some kind, in the past, there'd been some kind of call for beings to come here. So it's kind of weird because I didn't know anything about it. I'll be honest, I'd never heard of a book or anything like that. But again, in hindsight, I can say that actually that was kind of funny because I've now read about things that seem to connect to that experience. But the little slice of being this being, in a way, was the least profound of the things that happened. So I just kind of filed it. Filed it in the back. Who knows why? Why am I seeing some alien in a spaceship? Who knows?
Right.
You've taken a psychedelic compound. You can see anything. That's what it's shown me. But then, obviously, these many years later, reading Valerie's book, there's this description of destruction of this craft in space, of smaller ships escaping and flying towards Earth with these tall, human-like beings in these blue uniforms, which I saw blue uniform.
Wow, yeah.
So I'm like, well, that's kind of funny, because obviously maybe that was a glimpse of the events that she's talking about, and that for some reason, I was given a glimpse of that. That gave me the personal connection and the interest to dig deeper into it. And I don't know if I would have without that. I think that hook, then you're intrigued, because you think this is a super interesting book, but maybe there's something more to this, or a reason why I've been drawn to this, why this has come up again, a similar story to what I've seen in this experience.
Another thing thrown at you.
Exactly. So then I took that as, so to look closer at. And I did feel, I'll be honest, I felt sort of a visceral kind of emotional response to reading the book. I was quite very much emotionally affected, and felt kind of a tense sadness for the destruction of this craft and this crew. So maybe to do with that past experience, but certainly, yeah. So it really it grabbed me emotionally, and I thought, well, if this is real in some way, what can you do with it? Because at the time of this, obviously I had a lot of other things happening, like I said. So I mean, I didn't really do very much with it initially. I read the book, I thought, this is interesting, but I still had the things going on with this site in the jungle, which ended up being in the Telegraph, and picked up, and in fact was picked up by the Science Channel, all that stuff. And so that became kind of globally known. And I was actually invited to do some filming with the Science Channel because of that. And so originally they were going to come to Ecuador, and we were going to go to the site and record there. And then they decided it was going to be too difficult, because it's kind of got to hike through like a swamp, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a very remote area.
It's remote, so you got to hike through a swamp, up and down some mountain ranges. Not like Kilimanjaro or anything, but up and down through swamps. So difficult with film crew, right, and with equipment and all that stuff. So
of course,
on balance, they decided instead that what they would do is they wanted to do an episode in the Georgian Republic, filming a group that was going to go back up into the Caucasus Mountains to find some giant's bones, which they'd previously been up there and found some giant's bones, right?
Wow.
So they were going to return and find some more bones, because the original ones had basically got lost inside the Georgian National Museum. The guy that, well, I mean, the thing is, it's a funny, because usually you think these things may be conspiratorial type stuff, but the problem was the main researcher died, and nobody knew where he'd actually filed these things. And they said it's an enormous archive. They didn't know where he'd put these bones. So they said what the thing to do was to then go back up there and find more. Yeah.
How big were they, these beings, or these giants?
Over 7 foot. So there was there was 2 different skeletons that were in this crypt area of a ruined kind of structure that were both seated. They were in a kind of a seated position facing each other, with their, I think if I remember rightly, with their skulls in their laps, buried like that, and they were both over 7 feet tall.
Wow.
So like a really strange burial. Like, and you got this is up in the Caucasus Mountains inside of a national park, and just like really middle of nowhere, and just these ruins on top of this mountain. And so I got kind of invited to do that, and ended up flying to Georgia from Ecuador, doing all of that, some of that one as well. Yeah. So
what
again,
an adventure.
Right. The flow of this journey is wild. So we do all that, and I'll tell you, there were some frightening moments, because on the way I was actually stopped by some kind of weird secret Turkish police in the airport, who basically tried to detain me. Like, they tried to trick me into go. It was really weird. They started suggesting that I might have drugs on me, right? And I'm like, well, I've got no drugs on me. And they're like, oh, where have you come from? Like, Ecuador? And they're like, oh, Ecuador, drugs. And I'm like, yeah, but I've already, been searched in Amsterdam. Oh, Amsterdam, drugs. I'm like, it's all the worst places you can say to collect with drugs. Right? So then they're like, you've got to come down this. It was really weird, because they picked me out at the desk at the beginning, took my passport, and they were laughing. They were talking to each other and laughing. And I thought, well, this is not good. Why are police looking at your passport and then just chatting to each other, laughing? So you get a sense straight away that something's not right. Okay. They vanished off for a while. I went through the scanner, all that stuff, was waiting in the departure lounge, and then they came back just before the plane was going to take off. So it had been left long enough that now I was going to miss the flight. They were going, we want you to come down this corridor. And I can tell you what, I mean, as someone who has some level of intuition, I knew that this was bad, that these were bad people, that these were not your regular police. And I checked with the airport people. I said, are they even real police? And they're like, yeah, they are. Because they were like plain clothes, some kind of division at the airport. And they wanted me to come down this corridor. And I knew in my heart of hearts, if I go down that corridor, something terrible is going to happen. Something terrible. Like, you're going to get set up with heroin in your bag, sort of terrible, something really bad. So I basically tipped out my bags in front of everyone in the departure lounge and said, look here, there's no drugs. I made a scene so that everyone is watching, because, evil things happen in silence, and when you were not being watched, right? It's very, very difficult with an audience, right?
Absolutely. When everyone's looking,
Right. So the thing is, of course, if this was all legitimate, that would have made no difference. They would have just
Mhm.
took me down the corridor. Instead, they said, "Put the things back in your bag and go." So whatever they wanted to do,
You
that
fixed it.
shows you, because if it was a real thing, a
Yeah.
legitimate thing, that wouldn't have made any difference, right? But whatever they
Right.
wanted to do needed to be done in silence and in
That
quiet,
is
without anyone
scary,
seeing.
Bruce. I'm
Scary
so
as hell. I
happy
walked
you.
down that
Yeah.
corridor to the plane, and they were watching, just smiling evilly at me the whole way as I walked down onto the plane.
How bizarre.
And the crew person said to me, "I've never seen anything like that happen to anyone else." Yeah, she said
Wow,
that.
it's like they were watching you or something. I don't want to get too
Yeah.
conspiratorial here, but like from like your entire journey in a way, you know.
Oh yeah, and that
before you
I'd
got
add
there.
on. That's not the first time I've had something a bit like that. Because when I flew back from Egypt,
Mhm.
right? So remember, this isn't that long later. But before this all began, when I flew out to Egypt, when I came back from Egypt, as I was coming off of the plane, literally as you depart the plane, so not into customs, but as you come through the little tunnel, the first room you get into. So I'm flying into Heathrow, and the crowd of people coming off the plane. There's two guys that are standing already in there, and they're looking, and they see me, and they call me over, and they show their badges, and they're plainclothes police, and they ask me where have I come from, what was I doing there, what is my job, and all this stuff, like, and didn't search me, but they were clearly waiting for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't like you come to customs. These were two police waiting at the departure of the plane and looking in the crowd. And as soon as they saw me, they called me over and started questioning me. So
So
for
bizarre.
whatever reason, I am on some kind of list somewhere.
Yeah, it's
That I
like
have
when you
no
show
doubt of.
it's like when you show interest in this subject, especially if you like what you did, actually traveling and going and gathering the evidence and seeing the evidence for yourself. They just don't like that because
There's definitely
some
some
kind of
parties
threat.
that don't like it. That there's some threat in this stuff somewhere that they do not want you to talk about. And I know that people say, like, the dangers and threats, but I can say, yeah, there is real threat in these topics, in some cases. So that was, so that all stuff happened. Did the exploration in Georgia, came back from there, continued stuff in Ecuador, and then there was a point where I got my previous book kind of done, which is the Forgotten Exodus, which is all about rewriting the migrations around 60, 70,000 years ago, the out of Africa theory, and some of the older story of the, Denisovans, Neanderthals. So it's a kind of a fresh look at the human story and the early migrations, and it sort of counters the mainstream view. So that was a book I was working on for about a year over in Ecuador. So that was finished and published in 2017.
Got it.
Right. So once that was done, I was like, well, I either follow that on with a second book, which would have been Into America, and how the migration continued, basically, and like the peopling of Americas, or I pivot into the aliens research and write a book on that. And so to weigh this up, I thought, well, I've just got this book that's doing reasonably well. Graham Hancock has written the forward. He's put it on his social media, so the book is out there. It's doing quite well. It makes a lot of sense to follow it up. But then there's the other bit saying, well, if this other story is true, it's more important.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
But to weigh up whether it's true, I thought, well, I have to have at least, say, one of the major claims in that narrative I have to be able to objectively support with scientific evidence, because otherwise, why am I going to throw away my opportunity to do well on the ancient mystery stuff, and the rewriting of human migrations for a story that may just be made up, or is, or even if it's true, it's got no basis. For anyone else, they could just look at it and say it's made up.
Right. Exactly.
And like Graham sort of said, if you go into the aliens thing, you're basically handing a stick to your skeptical rivals to beat you with.
Right. Is that why he doesn't really touch it? Because I know he's thought about it, obviously, Fingerprints of the Gods, all these books, but he never really says, "Oh yeah, it's aliens," and he's probably right.
He doesn't. I think partly because certainly he has a recognition that it's a problem topic, but also, most of his view, I think, is, as he clarifies, is that he does accept alien intelligences, but more metaphysical, non-physical, shamanic entities. And so he does view it as there is contact with non-human entities, but he's not, from my understanding, he's not convinced there's been a physical visitation.
Oh, good.
And But the thing is, if you look at a statement he has said, he said if there has been, he would expect to see the evidence, if anywhere, in DNA and in genetics, which is really interesting because, of course, that's where I go.
Yes.
And so I weighed it up. I looked as best as I could. I assessed the story that was in Valerie's book and was able to find enough points where I could support the claims with objective evidence that it was worth doing. That I thought, you know what, I think I can put my name to this and argue this, that this is potentially a real event and not just somebody's, mind conjuring up a strange kind of new age story.
Where did Valerie get this information from? Is it is it like, was it again, was it transcendental meditation, shamanic journeys? Interesting to see where she got that information from.
Sure. Now Valerie's an interesting character too, because of course she is she's a spiritual medium and a past life therapist, like regression therapist. So she's very much involved in holistic and alternative psychical kind of topics. So she previous to that was a businesswoman, international businesswoman, but she'd had things happen in her own life. Had got involved with sort of transcendental meditation and gone out to Sai Baba's retreats and all of that kind of stuff, and had a transformation in her life, and had gone on to be a medium and a holistic therapist. But the reason why this actually happens, where she gets this kind of narrative come to her, is a little bit of another funny story where I tried to make it brief because, again, all these things can go off into side angles. But she was contacted through a friend of a friend by a lady who was asking, could she look after an ancient Aboriginal artifact called a chiringa? And the reason why this happened is because this other lady, Helen, she hears that Valerie lives in a house called Al Chiringa, and Al Chiringa is the dream time. So this is an Aboriginal term. She knows. She also knows that Valerie's involved with alternative, open-minded kind of person, right? So she's thinking, I've got this artifact. I need it temporarily looked after somewhere it would be safe and it's appropriate with somebody that wouldn't mind having a request for something strange like that put to them. Because Helen needs to go into hospital. She's very, very unwell. So she arranges with Valerie to do this. And Valerie's like, okay, yeah, fine. It's all wrapped up in paper bark, which is how it should be. You're not supposed to see these things or touch them. She has it in a box, puts it in her back room. Now, Helen has received this from an Afghan family, a member of an Afghan family who's working with her in indigenous media productions. Okay. And this artifact, the history is that a ancestor of theirs was a camelia, which is a camel trader that would have plied their wares across the central desert. And whilst they were doing this, they went into a cave near Uluru and they saw this object, which apparently was luminous, like almost glowing, in the cave. They took this and they actually took it to the nearby indigenous village and asked the people, did they want it? And the people were frightened and said, no. Nobody wanted to take it. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. They were scared, witless. So this family ended up keeping us for like 100 years, passed down in the family. But they also understand that this is something really sacred and should go back to the real custodians. And they know that Helen has been initiated into Aboriginal law. She's I can't remember which dreaming, but she's initiated by quite a famous indigenous author and practitioner. So she, to them seems like a link that they can potentially get this artifact put back. Helen recognizes this is something, she says, very powerful dreaming, and it's really it's a men's artifact. Well, so women shouldn't even look at it, touch it, have anything to do with it.
Interesting.
Potentially, you could be speared to death for that.
Wow.
You could the law around chiringas, if you are not supposed to be handling them or looking at them, there, depending on which tribe you're in, you could have your eyes plucked out, you could be speared to death. There's a really strong law around how they're kept. So if you're kept like in a cave away from everyone, only the high elders, the clever fellas, kind of shamanic elders, that they would bring them out during specific kind of initiation rituals, that they are said to be receptacles of consciousness, that they are in some way alive, that they were left. There's two versions of the story. Either they were left here in the Al Chiringa in the creation time by Al Chiringa beings, or that they are outer ringer beings that turned themselves into impermeable artifacts so that they would be here alongside us, sentient and receptacles of knowledge. They're also called communication stones, that they communicate knowledge and information. So there's an interesting, Aboriginal law as well.
Yeah.
And so this thing has now come to Helen. So Helen is like, well, I want to get it back to them. She becomes very ill. She needs it temporarily looked after. And so Valerie does that. So there's a kind of, again, a strange backstory to the artifact itself. Now, Valerie, after a few weeks of being in her house, starts to have a kind of a voice to skull or psychic kind of communication. Now, I can't tell whether it's technological, voice to skull, whether it's psychical, but she starts having a voice talk to her, telling her that it's Outringer, and that it's a star person, and that there's this whole story that is supposed to be returned to humanity, about a visitation, about genetic, intervention in our origins, this whole mega story. And the very brief of it is that giant ship comes here through some kind of what sounds like a kind of wormhole or something like that, comes through from the Pleiades, that this craft is meant to be essentially taking over management of Earth. Earth is under the management of a separate group of beings that are resident here at that time, another advanced group that are more negative, and that there is an agreement that this planet is going to be handed back over to this other collective. And so this ship has arrived, and it's a colony ship, not weapons or particularly, it's a colony ship, arrives with supposedly about 50,000 beings on board, and is a living sentient silica AI craft. It's described that it's grown. It wasn't built. It was grown in a silica matrix and has been imbued with a sentience. So this is like a living silica AI. The thing is then, so it's in orbit. Then there is a betrayal, is described. The ship is blown to bits in orbit. Some of the ships get down to Earth, a few of them, not many. Most are destroyed in space. A few survivors come down at a place called Gosford in New South Wales. And so Gosford today, for anyone out there not familiar with it, is probably, in terms of the fringe world, is best known for the Gosford glyphs, which is a set of Egyptian-like hieroglyphs on 3 walls at a place called Carryong at Gosford. Either the Gosford glyphs or the Carryong kind of site is an Aboriginal sacred site, which also includes these glyphs. Now, there's debate on whether they're modern or ancient, or I'm not going to go into that particularly, but that's what it's probably better known for, those glyphs. So very near to that is where allegedly these craft land. Right. There is also in this narrative, there is the claim that these beings, realizing they cannot now take, I suppose, control or, management of this planet, and that they basically can't really colonize, they can't do anything because they are not able to live here long term. They use genetic engineering technologies to modify themselves to live on planets, right? Which makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the things that stood out to me is like, stories of people to land on another planet and live there. Like, how unlikely is that? Right? How do you adapt to a different gravity, to air, or all of these things, practical concerns? Well, they say they modify themselves en route to new planets so that they will suit the environment.
And that makes
but they haven't finished it. It makes a lot of sense. That's what stood out to me, because you often don't get those details. Someone's making up a story. Often it just jumps from scene A to scene D, and you're like, how would that work? And again, this is a person who's not a particularly technical person, right? We're talking about, again, like meditator and alternative media and all that, but not really a person who's saying anything about AI ships and how an AI ship might function, or how aliens would modify themselves to live on a new planet. So these things also stood out to me as being, well, that's quite strange, because this doesn't seem like a person who would really be thinking like that.
Right.
And so these beings then say, well, we can't live here long term, but what we can do is modify the hominins that are already here, which they say have already been modified by these other groups that have been engineered by this other group that's here. And they can modify them and make them more like themselves, upgrade their brains, upgrade their awareness, and pass on to them a legacy, a kind of a star legacy that they hope will help those beings free themselves from the control of this other party and take this planet in this direction they'd planned to take it. So it's what I now would call colonization by proxy, in the same way that we have proxy wars, right? That you can have proxy colonization, because if what really matters is your ideology and your culture and your aims, It doesn't necessarily need to be you to do it, you know. So they
Such a
realize that
fascinating
they don't
story.
need to do it. Yeah, and again, these are complexities again that, you know, if
Right.
it was someone trying to write sci-fi, you'd be like, wow, that's brilliant that you thought that through. Because it's, you would need to know, like, and again, why would you be manipulating these beings and stuff, you know, for what? So
Right.
that is explained. And then the other thing that stood out to me, because again, I was going to say, these I'm just pointing these out, these are the kind of events that I think can be checked. Giant ship exploding in orbit, you know, would it leave some debris, is what I'm thinking. Genetic engineering of a new race, would we have signatures in the genome? And then the third thing that stood out was they talk about that 5 years later, there's a follow-up mission by other members of this alliance, and that they basically are more like a militaristic or policing wing. And so they tell these other beings that are here, leave the planet or we're going to bombard it. And so this other group mostly leave. And they say that what we do, they said, you know, we don't bomb it or something. They said, you know, we use asteroids. They say it makes your nukes look like pea shooters because we can pull in an asteroid, and if we want to, we can split a planet open. And you think you're talking about a completely different level of violence, you know, planets. So they bombard the planet with asteroids to finish off these, what it is, like underground facilities, which not all of them have been vacated. So they bombard them. And so, well, that also is an event on such a scale that it has to leave traces, you know?
Right.
So that's what I was thinking. So though there's a lot of other aspects to the story, the things that stood out to me is, well, if I was going to validate any of this as being real, what could persist in time? Again, the suggestion was this is somewhere towards 900,000 years ago. I've seen two dates in their work, 700,000 and 900. And something saying that their perception of time was different. And I thought, well, okay, well, let's look between that range, 700 and 900,000 years ago, and see what we've got, you know?
Yeah.
And it turned out that, yes, at 700 and nearly 790,000 years ago, that you have this rain of silica melt glass debris that rains down across a 12,000 kilometer pathway from China down to Antarctica, which is considered a historical geological mystery, which is called the Australasian Tektite strewn field. So I'd never heard of that. I mean, I don't know you guys, I'd never heard of it.
I didn't. I knew about tektites, but I didn't know about this until I read it in the book. And you know, strangely enough, I have a tektite, and I randomly just got one from this site. And before the interview, I'm like, I gotta know which tektite I have. And so it's a Thailand one. I don't know if it's the same, but then I looked up Thailand tektite, and it said 780,000 years ago.
Correct.
I'm like, oh my god, which is nuts.
So that's part of the strewn field. So the strewn field stretches down through China, Southeast Asia, the Indonesian islands, Australia, and then down to Antarctica. So that's all part of that. So in my view, that's a piece of an alien craft. So
wow.
So you have this rain of debris, which again, is considered a mystery. So although there's a most popular hypothesis, which I'll talk a little bit about, which is the impact hypothesis, but it's recognized that this is not explained, that there are aspects to this event which today is still considered unexplained.
So there's no impact crater for this one.
There's no impact crater, and there are also, although part of the argument is that there could have been an impact, and it's maybe we haven't found the crater and it's in the ocean, and some people now have argued maybe it's buried under a lava field in Laos and all these. But there's other problems with this, because not only is the crater either non-existent or ambiguous suggestions of where it might be, but the size of the event should be something on the scale of the dinosaur killing, the Chicxulub impact. Now, Chicxulub, we can see the crater today quite easily, and that's 65 million years ago. So it needs to be something on that scale. And the reason why I say that is that some of the debris is coming in from space. I mean, that's totally accepted. So either you have to have an object that breaks up in space, or you have to have an impact on such a scale that it throws material into space. And so that isn't small impacts, those are very, very large impacts. So again, the Chicxulub event did do that. That some of the material would have gone in space and some material is thrown around the planet, it comes down elsewhere. But that's an enormous impact.
So
like
obviously
a planet killer.
Yeah. And so obviously something exploded in space, just like this.
Right. Because then you start thinking, well, because the other thing is that, with Chicxulub, you have a layer all around the world, right? You've got this geological layer from that, the K2 boundary, where you've got the materials that show that there had been wildfires, dust falling from the air. You'd had a cataclysm, and this is recorded in the geological strata, and you can take core samples, all that stuff, and yet there is no sign of that 780,000 years ago. There's no sign of that. So you get these oceanic samples, core samples, and so they find tektites, but there's no sign of the iridium layers, all that other stuff. So there is no global fallout. So hang on a minute. So you're telling me it's such a whack, it can throw things into space, but there's no cataclysmic fires, there's no iridium layer, there's none of this stuff that we should see, and it's a much younger event, 780,000 years ago versus 65 million. Like, where is the clear evidence for this nearly planet-killing impact? So there's a range of reasons why this is an unconvincing hypothesis, right? So although people will say to me, but Bruce, this is an impact, but if you go deeper into the literature, what you realize is actually no, it's not convincing, because there's a lot of holes that are left open. And whilst we're on the tektite thing, I'll just quickly clarify a couple of things. So there's a researcher over in the US who's a geologist, a fanatic of tektites, and he's written a few articles on, I think it's Meteorite Times, and one of them is a bit of the kind of the clincher to this, is that he has this sample of Australasian tektite which has two pieces that are welded together. He says basically says you've got an initial piece of melt glass which was cooled, and then some hours later some liquid glass has splashed onto it and is hardened. He said, well, that can't be in the same event. So that means you've got at least two distinct heating events. And so the only way you can explain that in this context is aerial bursts, that you've got more than one object breaking up. And each time these explode, they're like a nuclear bomb going off, like plasma storm. So that first piece has cooled, and then another chunk has come down and has exploded and thrown melt glass. And some of it by chance has slopped onto it and cooled later. And he says that is the clincher on saying that what you're dealing with is aerial bursts.
That's amazing.
The other thing is, and again, I'm not going to tune into technical, just so people know, because people go away from this, they'll Google it, and they'll say, well, it's an impact. So I'll just add the other one, is that there's a comet event down in the Atacama Desert around 13,000 years ago, which I don't think is connected to the wider comet impact topic of 13,000 years ago, but there is a comet event. So this comet it's known that it exploded over the Atacama Desert, and what they found is a type of melt glass which is layered and like folded and swirled and layered on the ground. So this is again from the kind of the plasma storm of the explosion and how it interacts with the ground, melting the ground, and it swirls and it moves around, and you've got material from the object mixing with the ground material. So this is classic signs of an aerial burst established. We know that was a comet aerial burst.
Right.
Well, with the Australasian tektite field, if you look in Southeast Asia, if you look in Indochina, where they hypothesized is ground zero, where you should see the crater, right, what you find is this muong nong tektite, which is a kind of layered tektite, which is the same thing. So you've got these layered tektites all swirled into different layers. This is the same pattern you've got from the aerial burst down in the Atacama Desert. So you've got two real clinchers, but what we're dealing with here is aerial bursts. And so you've got multiple objects coming in. Now, the reason why they say this is ground zero is because some of these chunks are like 20 kilos.
Whoa.
Right. So if you think
I didn't
about
know they get that big.
Bits don't fly very far.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So they accept.
They drop. Exactly.
Right. They're not going to fly 10,000 kilometers. So they know that this is going to be ground zero. This should be where if there's a crater, the crater should be there. And the ironic thing is you've got large pieces of this in southern China and on some of the Indonesian islands, as well as in Indochina, which would make the ground zero enormous.
Yeah.
Like 1,000 miles across or something,
Wow.
So this would be a crater beyond any crater that we would, ever have known. So it doesn't stack up. So you start thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is definitely not a cratering event. There's no giant crater, there's no iridium layer, there's none of that, but we've got all the indications of multiple aerial bursts. So now you get back to, well, what kind of object is this if it's pieces of it breaking the atmosphere? Because it's 75% silica from melted quartz, and then it's got like 10% aluminium, and then a load of other metals in it. So it's got an odd composition. Silica at that percentage isn't known in natural objects. Like you don't get that in asteroids and comets or any that we know of in this solar system, right? So straight away that would point you to an anomalous object that is interstellar in nature. So,
Mm-hmm.
so if you don't go then, you say, okay, well, we have something novel here that is an object that contains more silica than we've ever seen in another asteroid. And the other thing is the NASA guys back in the day when this was being researched by NASA rocket scientists, because they took an interest in this. The reason why is if anyone looks up australite buttons, you'll see that these are a specific form of the tektite, which looks like the kind of a nose cone or the front of a bullet or something like that. You know, it's got that shaping, right? This aerodynamic shape.
Yeah. It looks like a saucer almost.
Yeah. And that's because, so what they realized is, and again, you know, you can say it doesn't take a rocket science, but in this case, it does take a rocket science, to work out that this has come in from space. And so they redid the process that would lead to that in the NASA Ames, you know, research center. And so they concluded that these would have begun as small, cold, solid spheres of glass that had come in basically almost horizontal to the plane of the Earth, skipping along the atmosphere, skipping along the edge of the atmosphere, and then had gradually broken the atmosphere and come in at these very gentle angles, and then would melt at the front edge, start to run back, and you find so you get half of the ball is still there at the back, and the front is all melted into kind of the front of a bullet, kind of, and then they would eventually fall. You know, so you get them, and they're all across southern Australia, and there's some in Javanites, right?
Yeah.
So the rest of the strewn field isn't like that. So they are specifically nearly all in southern Australia. But these were, for them, was like a clincher that, well, in that case, these have to be coming in from space, from something that's in orbit, because those angles only make sense if you have a decaying satellite, because we see that in satellites. So in other words, because otherwise they should be coming in at really steep angles from space if they were like coming from out there. Again, if they're coming up from the ground and back down, again, you expect quite steep angles, right? So what you don't expect is that these are coming in orbital paths, and then they're just bouncing along. They can see in the bubbles stretching inside them that they've been bouncing along in and out of the atmosphere, and then they eventually come down. So they were like adamant that these have come in from space, you know. On the other side of it, sorry.
What did they think of what it's made of? You said it's silica and crystal, and did they ever bring that up in their research?
Yeah, so what they thought was that this was potentially volcanic glass from the moon, and that there had been So they if you go to like what could explain that within the bounds of the known, so the only thing that they could think of was volcanic glass, because this material is very similar to volcanic glass, and when I say that, it's because it is fairly homogeneous and fined. And so if anyone knows like glass, basically when you make glass for a window or for your, for your tableware, you mix all of the components, obviously, in a crucible over a long period of time. You know, it's really heated. You let the bubbles come off to get rid of volatiles and things you don't want, and you mix it all very well. And that is what you see in volcanic glass, because volcanic glass mixes in a caldera, you know, superheated over a long period of time. It outgasses, bubbles off all the volatiles. It's mixing for all that time. So you get these very, what we call fined glasses without much bubbles, you know, particular chemicals that have gone, and you know, so you get a nicer kind of glass. You know, if you get just like an impact or lightning, you know, if you've seen lightning glasses like fulgurite in sand, or if you get a nuclear bomb blast, you know, you get the trinitite. If you look at trinitite, it's very bubbly. It's basically quick melt and quick cool. So you just get this very bubbly material full of bits of stone, half melted material, half melted sand. You know, it's not mixed, it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous, basically. So this is unlike that. So tektites fall into a funny area as being kind of anomalous, because there's a big question mark. How do you get a fined homogeneous glass without a period of extended heating and mixing? And that is a big unknown. That's why there's a really big question mark, because we don't know how the hell you can do that. But then you're looking at this glass and saying it's supposedly impact glass, but all of the impact glass that we know is definitely impact glass, right, from craters all around the world, looks nothing like it. It just looks like partially melted stone with loads of bubbles in it. Exactly what you'd expect, right? So anyone who looks at a picture side by side of tektite and established impact glass, you will immediately think these look nothing like each other. And so there is a head scratcher. And so you realize that there is something, that there's another process here. And so the assumption by the NASA scientists was, well, this must have already been glass when it came in, because that explains,
Right.
we don't need, because then we don't need to come up with some sort of wacky explanation. So if it was an impact on the moon and there was already lunar glass, and that glass blasted off and then came across to Earth and rained down, then that would explain it, right? Now, again, I have 2 technicals, but I'll do it very quickly. This theory fell apart after they went to the moon. They collected material. They realized that the lunar material is not the right chemical composition for this glass. They also realized that volcanism on the moon had ended too long ago, millions of years ago, couldn't be 780,000 years ago. So they started to find there was a number of reasons why it couldn't be. There was other issues about, like a swarm of glass coming this way would have been dissipated by the sun, or it would have rained down over the whole planet. There was all these other issues that had been raised. And so in the end, they capitulated and said, okay, we're wrong. This hasn't come from the moon. But all our opponents who are saying this is an impact, you have to explain these anomalies that our theory explains, that yours doesn't. And so they never did. They just won by default. And the way I look at this, it's like having 2 boxers in the ring and one guy has a heart attack. Okay, the other guy's the winner. But are you going to say in your heart of hearts that he won the fight?
Right. That's so bizarre of them to do.
Right, because it's not that you won by being the best and explaining everything. It's just the others had to drop out. They realized, no, there's an issue here. This can't be it. And
so crazy how they tiptoe around these things, huh? And but I mean, I think isn't kind of opening up more a little bit. I think the scientific community, or at least there's a niche there. I mean, do you think that this can be turned into peer-reviewed papers for other scientists to look at? Because just the way you describe it, and just seeing where this fits, where this craft would fit in this story, it's kind of hard to refute. What else can it be?
Well, that's why I did write a paper on it. I've got a preprint paper which is on ResearchGate, which actually was in the top 10% for most popular papers that were published in 2022 on ResearchGate, which has a huge number of people put their preprints and their articles on there. That's my first ever one, and it's still in the top 10% for that year, and it's also in the top 20% for all documents ever uploaded to ResearchGate. Now, the funny thing is, right, you think about that, and you think the funny thing is, we've all seen news articles about preprints from ResearchGate. And not one media platform even mentioned it. It's never been mentioned by any media platform, despite the fact it's more popular than most of those preprints that we've seen in papers, where they link the preprints. It's not that it's not peer reviewed, because I've read lots of articles which are about preprints. Right? It just simply, I guess, it didn't fit the narrative. And again, it's a controversial area, so it's funny. But I did have like a leading tech type scientist actually messaged me saying, my paper was very interesting, and he didn't necessarily agree that the alien part, but it was very interesting. And and I thought, well, that's telling, because those people won't say anything to you if they think it's a crock.
Right.
So obviously he's looked and he's realized, I've put together an argument based on all the other studies. I mean, I'm not just pulling it out of nowhere. I've referenced all the studies that I've had to look at to understand this. So yes, I mean, really, but the problem is, again, in peer review, it's an easy thing people to say, and you see it, why don't you just make a peer review paper? Well, yeah, it's a nice thought, but so I'll put it this way. I had a conversation a few years ago when I was doing the out of Africa stuff, right? I was talking to a geologist about some of the arguments I make in there, and he said, Bruce, because I'm, obviously I'm a tenured professor at a university here in Germany, and because when I want to put a paper, for review, which is on a slightly controversial topic, I will do my best to get all of the most acclaimed scientists in my field, if I can, the most luminary people to collaborate on that paper, and I will still struggle to get the journal to accept it, to review it, let alone for it to get through peer review. He said, I do not like your chances. So you got to think about that. It's easy to say to someone, just go and get your paper. But does anyone really think Nature is going to take a paper from someone with no PhD, with no collaborators on their paper, on a topic that's super controversial?
So sad.
You're not even going to open your email.
I mean, it really is sad. It really does feel like that we're still under the influence of these, these negative entities that the Palladians came to, save us from in some way. It really, because especially during COVID, when COVID happened, and it's still ongoing. It's always something that's happening. Always the population is being manipulated. Always being lied to. It feels something very anti-human is in charge of this place.
That is tackled in there, in the material. They do say that when she asked, were they all gone then, sort of thing, and they're like, no, not all of them.
Okay.
So that is part of what it's about, really, is that that they said that what they were doing was to give us the ability to pull away from control. But they said that the original version of humans had been engineered to be psychically controllable by that group, and was used as their minions and also as sacrifices for their own, what they believed were their own gods, which was another group of entities.
You're kidding me.
So those first humans were not having a good time before these beings arrived and did this upgrading. But we still have vulnerabilities. They said that even today you have not gone beyond having those vulnerabilities completely. So they warning us we need to kind of awaken our own psychic abilities, because we have to be able to defend ourselves in this reality. Again, this stuff, I know it sounds, to people out there listening, to think, oh, it sounds wacky, but this is why I said before I would ever write this book or talk about this in any serious way, is I had to have at least one of these major points validated, because I can't validate there was this other group here and that they engineered us with a telepathic weakness. That is just stuff it's stated to us. I can't validate, but like you said, there's suspicions about it because we see things about how we live today, things that are happening, narratives in the news, narratives in the community. So we can say, okay, there is anecdotal evidence suggesting some of this stuff. But in terms of objective evidence supporting things, the areas I could support was that a giant object made mostly of quartz or silica quartz, which is what I'm kind of told is this crystalline craft,
which is
something
crazy,
like that exploded in orbit over Indochina and left this enormous debris field. And right at the right time, when I'm sort of looking in this time frame, to know that 5 years later there's this bombardment. Well, it turns out in 2016, I'll just say that Valerie's book came out in 2003, so it's time stamped, right? Time stamped. Anything she says, you can say, well, she can't have cherry picked something from the future, right? So there is in 2016 there is the discovery of a multi-directional asteroid bombardment, by a German geological team. They found now that they think that these objects hit in Canada, Belize, I think Laos, Tasmania, and possibly Antarctica, that there was a multi-directional bombardment. And guess what the dating is? They've put it as, they said it's around 790,000 years ago.
Oh my God.
When you get something like that, you think, bang, these are just hits, just keep coming. Because what's the chances now? You've got two super anomalous events. This idea, a giant object, glass strewn across 12,000 kilometers, some of it coming from space, wackadoodle-doo stuff, and it's not explained. And now you find that, yes, the multi-directional asteroid event, that's real too. And it dates to the same time. And that, these objects are not from a breaking up. People say, well, maybe you've got a comet breaks up. No, because they said the chemical composition at the different sites is distinct. So these are different objects all coming in at the same time, whacking the planet from different angles. What the hell is going on there?
Unbelievable.
Because you're supposed to get one of those kind of objects every like 10 to 100,000 years, crazy time. Not all at once. This is not normal, right? So now again, another thing that they've said has happened, and that she could not have known about from conventional sources because no one had discovered it. Right? It wasn't known.
That's so nuts. So the El Chiringa thing, do you think it's from the ship then? That maybe it could be, I don't want to say like a CPU or something, but it's or some artifact they left behind, to communicate this.
The Chiringa, yes. I would describe the Chiringa as, I describe the Chiringa now as a Bracewell Sentinel probe, because back in 1960, Ronald Bracewell, a leading kind of proponent in the SETI field, who was one of the first people talking about how we would search for alien civilizations. So that was when, about a year before, they'd come up with the idea of searching for radio waves. Bracewell said that he thought it'd make more sense that advanced civilizations would send out autonomous AI probes that could act on their behalf to find new civilizations, monitor those planets and civilizations, and make contact remotely using these devices, because rather than you sending out radio waves or going yourself,
right, okay,
these things could be sent out, like, you know, thousands of them, to systems that you think are interesting. And he said the thing about that is you could have them programmed so that they would wait for a civilization to rise and to reach a certain point where it makes sense to contact them and to open direct contact. And this would act as your emissary of your civilization. Well, that is exactly what seems to have happened, because, you know, we're told that this artifact, even, and bear in mind we said earlier, in the Aboriginal lore itself, there's a suggestion that that's what these are, because they're saying these are either left here by these Outer beings, or that they are sentient Outer beings themselves, and that they are message stones, that they have information, and that they are super sacred. They're kept in these caves. They're powerful objects. There's all these taboos around interacting with them because they are powerful. People are scared of them, and they are in some way supposed to be sentient. And so now we have one of these things. It turns up and it starts talking, and it's telling her about this whole lost history and how it was brought here, that there was a craft, you know, that came here. It's been left here with the original people that were created. It's been here the whole time, has a whole record of our history, you know, and it's now opening up a communication, because we're supposed to now learn about this and understand our cosmic, you know, origins or links, and to understand other things about why things are happening on our planet the way they are. That we have a whole missing chunk. Yeah, we have a whole missing chunk of our story, and that these beings want us to understand it. And that they also, we think it would be exciting for us to be able to learn it through the evidence that still remains, because this is something where we've got tangible evidence of it that you can go away and check yourselves. Although Valerie never does that, but they do suggest that. And so I took on that role, which she, you know, she's not a technical researcher. It wasn't her thing. So she did it as a kind of, look, believe it or not, basically. You know, this is what happened to us. This is what our experience is. There was several dozen people involved who also had experiences around the artifact, and they had memories, like sort of past life memories, all sorts of strange stuff. So that's all in the book. They give a kind of a story of what else happened, you know, the survivors, the ongoing experiments, all this other stuff. But what I can validate really was these major events, right? And so the last one of those, of course, is the genetic engineering.
Now,
let's be honest, that's a popular topic. It's always been in the ancient aliens world and the UFO world. Pretty much, if you speak to any of the, let's say, most popular or leading thinkers, at some point they've said, we suspect that DNA has been modified. You know, it's kind of a trope in the field, right? That everyone says that. You have loads of people say that. I think one day the evidence will be from genetic engineering, probably not from a spaceship, or and that's kind of interesting, because, you know, obviously there's quite a few books out there and people have tried to make these arguments. But the thing is, if you're just going to say aliens came here and made us, you kind of have to start cherry picking, right? And you're going to look for things to validate your belief. Yeah. And this is very similar to the God of the Gaps argument, that, you know, the creationists who say God did a miracle and made humans, right? So they will do some cherry picking around some certain topics, tell you that shows that humans were made by God. Conversely, ancient aliens and UFO people will cherry pick around a few things to say aliens made us. Now, those are super problematic positions. And, you know, in terms of scientists, we'll all say that, you know, it's God of the Gaps, and conversely, it's basically an alien of the gaps, right? So, which are both, yeah, they are invalid, right? So the difference here is that's not how we're starting it. It's not because, you know, we want to show this alien. It's like the aliens are telling us it happened, and we have a date, right? So if that's real, we should see some stuff linked to that dating, and it should be profoundly strange, and it should really indicate that what they're saying is true, right?
So, and there's that famous graph that you've always presented, right, with the humans. Yeah, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because the funny thing, of course, because I've already written a book on human origins at this point, you know, my previous book is The Through Our Nexus, you know, which is tackling hominin origins and migrations. I already know the literature in that field, so I already know that there is a couple of conundrums, and that the dating on the origins of large-brained hominins happens to tie in very nicely with this. That there's a chart which I'm sure if people look up, you can see the chart where basically super archaics, so probably Homo erectus and habilis, other hominins, they diverge from the direct ancestors of all large-brained humans around about 800,000 years ago. So there's a range of about 700 to 900,000, where there's a kind of a diverging going on.
Yeah.
So these are obviously not necessarily, you can't in that chart show instant. So this is where the divergence is happening. It's right on that area. And the other thing about this, again, is with values, people say, oh, you could cherry pick that. No, because in 2003, when she published this, the dating on this was 400,000 years ago, right? Wow. It was believed that we split from Neanderthals 400,000 years ago. And that, so this date had shifted way back by the time I'm doing the work, right? So she'd have been seen as totally wackily wrong.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, I like things like that because people say, oh no, it's so wacky. And then suddenly the evidence catches up and says, well, actually, that date's about right. Yeah. And so it turns out that that's the split.
So what did they change? What does it show that they changed in our DNA?
Right. Time? So this is the thing that's really interesting. So when you look, we know that obviously there's a profound change. You see I'm sure like you said, you've seen the chart. The human brain size goes into overdrive around 800,000 years ago. So
which isn't normal, right? It doesn't happen that quickly. If it was evolution or normal evolution, it would take, I don't know.
No. So it's accepted something strange happens then. So there's been arguments about, was it that we started cooking food and somehow that changed it? Other people suggested, do we start eating those magic mushrooms?
Right.
But something has happened. That's the kind of thing. You can look at the chart, that something has happened that accelerates brain changes. Specifically size, but also we know there's other things about structure have changed. So there's something's happening. Right. Well, the thing is, when you zoom in on that, say, well, okay, what has been happening? There's about 5 lines of evidence that I look at. Now, the one that was always best known and is usually referred to by kind of ancient aliens people is chromosome 2, the fusion of chromosome 2. Right. So we know that other hominins and primates basically had 48 chromosomes. We have 46 chromosomes. We know that there is a fusion of an ancestral chromosome. It is peculiar because it's fused onto an active gene, which you wouldn't expect. Also, it has losses and additions of information compared to the other ancestral chromosomes. And it's doing some really important functions, like about reproduction, the brain, other stuff. And usually these kind of fusions would be a problem, like usually, called deleterious, it should be a problem. But in this case, obviously this is not a problem because we've replaced all the other humans. They've gone. We're here. So it's understood that this is giving us a benefit. So there's basically 3 criteria that is argued by scientists that has to make this become so widespread. First of all, it has to have happened in a small isolated population. It has to be that multiple individuals are interbreeding who have this, right? Because otherwise it will disappear again. It will just be recessive. And third of all, it has to be highly beneficial and helps us outcompete the other people. Now you start thinking about that. It sounds awfully like a lab setting. You've got a little group of people, multiple of them that suddenly get changes at the same time, and now they're interbreeding. And then when they're let out, they outcompete everyone else. They've been upgraded. Something's been done. But I mean, on its own, that wouldn't be, to me, is not enough because that's been around a long time. So, okay, people know about that. What we didn't know, though, until now, was the dating, because it wasn't known when this happened. Now, in the last year, a study has come out basically putting the timing of this in at around 800,000 years ago, so this fusion event. Right.
Wow.
So so just so obviously there's always a little range, but centering on around 800,000 years ago is when they think this fusion event happened. So we now got that bang into our area again, which is again, but the funny thing is, most of the people have always said that they think this would be 200,000 years ago when modern humans. No, this happens at the beginning when we split, when it's Neanderthals, Denisovans, us. We're all splitting away from those archaics, so that we've all got this chromosome change. Neanderthals, Denisovans, us, any of the large-brained hominins has the chromosome 2 fusion, right?
So that's crazy.
So that's happened at the beginning of that split, and it's obviously crucial to those large brains. The other things that happen, I'll try to whip through because I know it's sort of technical, but the things that really interest me is that, again, in the last few years, Valerie couldn't have known, is there was the discovery of areas of very strange code manipulate or code changes in non-coding DNA. So what was once called junk DNA. Now, this is really crucial because it is understood that if there was deliberate manipulation of an organism on our planet, particularly for a message, the message in a bottle hypothesis, which is the idea that aliens could send a message to us by encoding something into DNA. Now, if they were going to do that, if you put it as a gene changes, right? Genes changed quite a bit, not super
Right.
fast, but fast enough that those messages or signatures could be swept away by the normal process of evolution. So there was a guy, I can't remember the name now, but the scientist, he was saying, so basically, if we were going to look for a message or some kind of signature, we would have to look in the non-coding DNA, but particularly at what's called ultra or hyperconserved DNA regions in those areas, because some of these segments of code in our non-coding regions haven't changed in like 1 million years, 100 million years, crazy amounts of time. And so if you were to put a message in there or a signature, potentially, it can be there once that creature evolves intelligence, and it can now look at its DNA and it will find the indicators.
Yeah,
So,
it's like cryptography in a way. It's like that, where there's a lot of junk in there, but then there's ones that make sense, and then that one will stand out.
Yeah, something's going to stand out to you. And so the thing is, in the last few years, something has stood out. And what has stood out is called human accelerated regions. And so these are segments of code where when you compare us with all the other mammals, you can see that evolution seems to have been accelerated only in the human lineage. And that you now have several hundred of these human accelerated regions. And of the ones they understand, over half of them are to do with the brain, particularly brain development in the fetal stages. Hang on a minute. How's that random? Even I thought we were talking about random evolution here, aren't we? No,
that's not
hyper specific. And then on top of that, again, I always use this one little comparison to make it easy for people. The first one of these, HAR1, a 118 DNA letter long segment. So it's very short in terms of genes, but it's very short segment. Compared it between chickens, chimpanzees, human beings. Right, the chicken and the chimpanzee, they are 300 million years separated. So you have 300 million years of change between them since they shared an ancestor. That segment of code has 2 DNA letters different in it. So, super stable. One change every 150 million years. That's super stable.
Wow.
Right. So when they compared it across from the chimpanzee to humans, which we should only have 7 million years roughly of difference, should be 0 difference. Instead, they found that 18 letters had changed.
Wow.
So,
well, there you go.
Yeah. Right. So when they run the biostatistic programs on this, they came to the conclusion that there was essentially a 0% chance of this happening by any understood evolutionary mechanisms. And so to date, these areas are still not understood. We now have hundreds of them. So that's one lot of things. The other one very quick to go through is, again, in the last couple of years, they have found another kind of set of information in these non-coding areas called H-condels, which are human conserved deletions. So again, in hyperconserved DNA, they have found deletions. Big chunks of code have gone. And again, they're saying, well, this should be deadly.
There's proof of that? Like they can actually prove something was deleted?
Yes, because we're contrasting with the other mammals. So we know in all the other mammals, these areas are stable. And they're doing something incredibly important. They're so important that they're not changing for 100 million. You know what I mean? So it's like saying you change something and you don't have lungs anymore.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of important. But we would have no clue to do this because these areas are so important. They're so stable. We don't really understand them. But we know that across all these mammals, you'll find the same segments of code. So they are doing something really important. But yet in us, we're now finding areas are being accelerated, but also chunks gone. So that you think about it, they said, well, this you'd expect to basically be deadly. Like, how can this be good? And instead, they said it seems that it's allowed other segments to interact that wouldn't have, and they're to do with the brain.
And they're all to do with
giving us our brain, to giving us that brain again.
So
another set of anomalies that shouldn't be there, and it gives us our brain. So you've got the H-condels, the HARs, the chromosome 2. And then there's a number of genes. Some of them are described as basically mysteriously forming from non-coding material, like fully formed out of nowhere, that give us our neocortex, stuff like that. And I think the last one, and then just in the last 2 years, this is the last one, is what they call a three-dimensional genome refolding event, where basically the genome structure changed so that parts of the genome now interact in ways they wouldn't have. And the amazing thing about that is they said that is a one-off event. This is nothing to do with gradual changes. Right. This happened either in one sperm, one egg, or one fetus. This is something that happened in one generation. Suddenly the genome was refolded and it was critical to brain development. Like, so you
Wow.
get to this point, and you're like, and that's not in any other mammals. No one else is having this happen, just us.
Yeah, and it
Right?
all goes back to that time frame as well, right?
Yeah, it all goes back
these?
to that time frame, and you know that as well because you can see it on that other chart we're talking about.
Yeah,
Because that's right, because you can see when the brain changes, because suddenly it goes into acceleration. So that has to have a genomic root. You know, if you're seeing it expressed in the brain, then it's being changed in the DNA, right? And so now we're finding where those changes are, and they're super anomalous, and they don't appear in the other mammals. It's just in us, and they're nearly all to do with our brain that makes us so different from all the other creatures. So, like, we're at a point where, to be honest, I mean, to the reasonable man, if you were to do a legal argument, like to the reasonable man, and to look at that, you'd say, on balance, the evidence suggests that we've had an intervention of something, an intelligence. Because the only thing we know that can go counter to the natural forces of evolution in that way is intelligence, because we can do it. We can modify creatures. We can, we can hybridize creatures and stuff. So we know we can counter the forces of evolution. But we don't know natural things to it.
Yeah, we can delete too, right, with CRISPR. Yeah,
exactly. We can add and take away. So we're now seeing, that we are just approaching the entrance to the temple. So of how they do this stuff. That these are the masters of it. That the way I'd say it's like I could play I learned the keyboard a little bit, but I couldn't play next to Beethoven.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. These whoever's doing this, they know the music like they wrote it. They wrote the whole damn system of chords and keys, and so they're playing this game on a level we barely comprehend, because like I say, these are areas of code where if you make one DNA letter change, you can wipe out a species.
Exactly. It's not a joke.
These areas are so stable, so you'd have to know unbelievably well the code and what's important in the genome to even begin to play around with these areas. And the fact that they've changed hundreds of them, to me, tells us what we're dealing with is an intelligence that knows DNA either like it wrote it, or it's DNA based and it's had a long time learning its own code. But either way, it's a long way ahead of us on this stuff, and it's able to basically just rewrite us.
I mean, you do also mention in the book that our brains got bigger, but then the pelvis didn't, right? So for the birth canal, and maybe that's why also we come out so small, and that we have to be nurtured over time, because all other animals and mammals on Earth come out basically almost ready. They can walk and they can see. Yeah. So
I find it fascinating. So we call neoteny.
Neoteny.
So this is so neoteny. So when we see all these animals, like you say, they come out and they can basically the horse, gets up in a few hours, it's walking around or whatever, right? Maybe even less. Sometimes I've seen one where the horse got up basically with it straight away after being born or something, but most animals, shortly afterwards they're up, right? We know that's not the same with us. We take years. So we have something that's different. And what we found out is that, again, you can see this visually. If you look at a picture of a baby chimpanzee and a human toddler, and you put them together, structurally, they're very similar. Like the face of the infant chimpanzee or an infant ape is very similar to a human infant. Where they become very different is in adulthood, because when they go through their kind of their kind of puberty and get to adulthood, you get the protruding jaw, you get the brow ridges, you get a reshaping of the face and the skull, and they obviously look totally different at that point, totally different. And obviously they're super hairy as well, they grow all the hair, all this other stuff. That's mostly features of adulthood in apes and primates, right? We don't do that. Or why is that? Because we are jammed on the brakes into our infancy. We never become the adult form, and in fact the adult form would be closer to Neanderthals. And although they still obviously had these changes, but they are more robust than us. And one of the reasons for that is because we have even more neoteny than them, because we are more sort of tamed. In some sense, we've been kind of tamed. We know that because when you look at animals that we ourselves keep, right? So dogs and other pigs, whenever you kind of tame an animal, there's actually genetic changes occur. And it gives us a kind of them flatter faces, they get like a curly tail, they get sort of stretch changes in their face.
And childish, right? Yeah.
Right. And they get but we know that this is a factor of that. But also the neoteny side of it gives us abilities, like a flexible mind, flexible brain, because infants do play, learning, accelerated learning. We can't compare, really old people with young people. You can learn so much faster. But then if you would say that if we had gone into our adult stage, you would not have that ability in your later life to be such a flexible thinker. And that's why you see, like, humans, we play all the way through life. You want to play for sports and football and fishing and everything.
So true.
We're still playing, and also we are still learning. We're able to be, masters of multiple trades and stuff. Most animals do one thing repetitively. That one nut they have to break open. They become the specialist in it. But they don't do a lot else. They look after their kids. Specialized thing they do, and the only stage where they do all these plays is quite young, and then when they stop doing that, they go towards specialization. We don't. We've been jammed on, and that's reflected in how we look. That we keep the flat face and the not much hair and all of these things that are to do with being in your infancy, that we are jammed into it. That's why we're
amazing insights. Amazing. I mean, yeah, and that's why we because humans continue to be curious, continue want to explore, and it's like they put that in us to wake us up in some way. Like you're saying, it's by proxy, try and take over by proxy from these other beings, maybe putting us on this path. Really fascinating. I mean, I guess time to them must be something also different, where millions of years it's not the same to us as it is to them.
It would certainly seem so, that they're not hurried in the way that this can be left to just play out, rather than something that there's like a great sense of super urgency, that it's left to play out over time. That they've done their intervention, and then it's left to play out, kind of up to us what we do with this situation. After that, now whether they're watching, interacting in some sense, but clearly they're not here, like running the government, hello, we're the Galactic Federation, so they're certainly not doing that. So we seem to be left for this to play out, but but we are at a point where it seems that certainly in the case that I'm working with, to my knowledge, it's the only case in the whole of like ufology, alien contacts, ancient, which provides objective scientific evidence that supports a physical alien contact event. And the only way we could have had this, and the thing about this is the only way that this could have come about is them giving the information, because I would not have gone looking for this, and I would not have known where to start. So
it's a fascinating journey. It is like a movie, and and just the way things, how it started, how things were, I guess, given to you in some way or provided to you, and you running with it too. You have to give that to yourself. You're saying, well, look at this, I'm gonna go research this some more.
Most people wouldn't, would they? You'd think, no, like, it's a wacky story. Like even I said, even Valerie and the people that were involved in her story, which is several dozen people, none of them went on to actually do like a kind of a deep research to see if they could validate this. They just took it as their, experiences they went through, this kind of strange contact event, group contact event. Obviously she put out the book. Some of the other people have kind of, I guess, spoken online or whatever, but they've not really gone to any great attempt to say this is real, people should take it seriously. They've left it at that. So I think that I'm probably unique in that, actually to take it a bit more seriously and say, well, hang on, if this is real and we can validate this is literally like world changing, paradigm changing, and also contains a kind of a warning narrative, that there's something else here in the room with us, and we have to become aware of it, because otherwise you're subtly being manipulated by it on some level that we don't know quite to what degree, but they leaving open the fact that it's not just them, that there's two parties in this story, and that one of them doesn't seem to have the best of intentions for us, and and it's where we're moving into now, of course, as well today, like sort of pivoting a bit, because obviously there's a lot going on in the UFO and aliens space.
Lot, exactly.
We've got congressional hearings, we've got multimedia kind of stuff happening, movies. We've got really a big sea change, in terms of the topic.
Very big sea, definitely. But what do you think of these whistleblowers? Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, the whistleblower stuff is, well, my opinion, I was expressing quite a lot, is that that there's no whistleblowers for a start. Although people keep referring to them as whistleblowers.
Agreed.
The way I look at that is, if I was to say to you, I am an aerospace industry whistleblower, which obviously we've had a few of those come out, right? They're saying that
in the past,
shoddy things are happening, planes are crashing, so we've had a couple of those come out. But what if I was to come out and say, I'm an aerospace whistleblower from Gigon Corp Aerospace, and I want to tell you about their horrible processes and what's happening, and you can't find that Gigon Corp exists.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to really, before even going into anything I tell you, my testimony or, any of the fact that I'm not presenting any evidence, I've got no evidence. I'm just telling you, Gigon Corp is making dangerous planes. People are going to die. And then you're like, well, what evidence do you have? Well, trust me, bro. I'm telling you.
Trust me.
And then you're like, well, that's not good. But at least we can, maybe look into Gigon Corp. Oh, no, because they're like a super secret aerospace company under a mountain. You would never find them. Like at what point do we say then, well, perhaps you're not a whistleblower then, because like we can't even find that the organization you work for exists.
Right.
You can't even tell
they
where
won't
it
say.
is.
Yeah, and they won't say who it is either.
So if you can't tell me that, if you can't show me you even worked for that industry, right, then I don't even need to know about the evidence, because you can't get to the bit where you even have the job. Right. And that's what my problem with this whistleblower thing is that people are not even questioning that first bit, let alone the fact there's not evidence presented. But if you can't even give me a letterhead or something showing that you worked at the place and it exists, why do I have to listen to your story? I mean, it's absurd. It's
I mean, as an example of what a whistleblower is, like Snowden. Snowden, I think he's a
real
whistleblower
place to be understood.
Yeah, because he actually came with the evidence and dumped it on all of us and left. Right, he actually had to flee because he's scared of, and still the U.S. government is after him. So if these guys are actually whistleblowers, they wouldn't be given time on TV. They wouldn't be given.
And you can name real organizations that we can look up. Like I can look up the NSA. It's got like a website and stuff. I can look up the CIA. I know they exist, right? But if you just tell me I work at the Deep State Men in Black company or something, I can't find any of that exists. I mean, like, I think people are getting it when you get to the bit of saying they've got no evidence of the story. I think that is missing the bit where you say there's no evidence that even thing exists or you had that job. I mean, so to the point of them having no evidence for the story is almost a moot point. So there is no evidence they've had the job, that the place exists, or that their stories are true. So they're not whistleblowers, right? They at best, maybe in some cases, what we'd call experiencers, people that have had strange experiences in their lives, and that they interpret those experiences as them working in some kind of secret program or having contact with aliens. Now, I can accept that because we know there's lots of people that seem to have those kind of experiences, right?
Now, for sure.
It doesn't mean that they're physically real even. I can't say that, but there's a lot of people who say, I have these memories, or I'm pretty sure that an alien came in my room.
Like what's his name? Bilch, right? Was it Captain Bilch or Lieutenant Colonel?
Bilch, giant mantis came in his room, was biting his face and stuff, and you've got people that they seem to have really great credentials on paper, scientists, obviously in his case, a senior kind of top scientist and
a nuclear guy too, apparently.
Nuclear guy, military career, and he comes across quite authentic in the way he presents it,
absolutely.
But there's no evidence that it's objectively physically happening, and conversely, the evidence is there that it's not, because he's telling you the mantis started biting part of his face off to make a point, but obviously he still has his face, right? Because I saw him on the video.
Exactly.
So like you'd have to say that this is either it's not happening in physical reality, or they totally fixed his face up or something. But the easier one of those to go to is that this wasn't happening in physical reality, that these are some kind of altered state or visionary experiences. Now, not to take away anything from that, because that can still give you PTSD and be super real for you and all the rest of it. But what it doesn't show me is that there was definitely alien mantids coming to your house in a spaceship. That is going to take a lot more convincing. So I'm willing to accept that. And I also, like I said, I'm willing to accept people saying that they have memory. I said this to Jason Sands, who obviously is another one, the whisperer. I said to him, look, if you had said to me, I'm an experiencer and I have these memories, they could be dreams or visions, I'm not sure, but they make me believe that I was in a secret program where I was going to caves and shooting aliens. So you know what? I could take that and say, well, I can extend a level of belief that you believe, or you feel that you have these memories, and that for you feel that they were very real, vivid, and they feel like real. But as you have no evidence, that you're going to present it to me as possible dreams, possible visions, possibly real, but you can't really validate it. So
Agreed.
that I'd be
Agreed.
quite. I don't like people trying to make me believe stuff that they have no evidence for and that objectively has holes in it. They make me think either they're made up or visionary experiences, right? Because if you just said, yeah, there's loads of holes in my story, so I don't know if it was real, if it was visionary. Do you know what I mean? That's
Yeah,
why
and I feel
can't people just be a
yeah.
bit more straight like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even Jason Sands, when he tells a story about the blue alien being, I mean, it does sound, plausible, I guess. But there's other 3 people in the car that were with him. They didn't come out as well, or it's hard to prove that too. Jake Barber, I think, is a different story. I think this guy is something's up though, and I want to really give him the chance because he's done great so far. But he is an expert at this, and he said it. He's been part of red teams, right? Apparently, they sent him to go after Stephen Greer's whistleblowers to the event there to gather them up and shut them up. But then he heard Michael Herrera's speech, and he goes, "Wait a minute, that's true. That those containers, that's exactly how they are." And blah blah blah. And he became a whistleblower after that, supposedly. Or Jane joined that side, and he said he went to the CIA to go because his life was in danger to ask for help. But apparently, they asked him for help, saying that they're being bullied as well and wanted the security detail. And now he's doing Skywatcher. I mean, what do you think about this Skywatcher thing endeavor?
I'd say Skywatcher is basically making ritual ceremonial entity summonings cool again.
I know, just making it scientific, right? It's like how the military made remote viewing. I mean, they took something that, like you said, was in the occult, but made it and put it on paper as a process. So that's what he's doing, right, for ritual occult practices.
Basically, yes, it's like ceremonial ritual magic, gathering people into a field and all going into some kind of like ritual, some sort of ritual you got to do to go into the state, so the entities will come. And apparently that some did apparently come, and the last stop was some sort of amorphous blue blobs that appeared or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, does that sound to you like a structured alien spaceship is coming to contact? No. It doesn't to me. It's that at best you are somehow inviting some kind of energy from somewhere that is if that happened, is manifesting as just this blue glowing blob thing, right? So that's much more in line with ritual magic experiences than it is with intelligent beings coming in craft. So definitely there's a divergence between the narrative that we're kind of people are wanting to hear, which is that there's these aliens in these ships are coming and egg ships, but then what they actually happens when they have these summonings, apparently there's like glowing blobs of energy appeared or something, so even the experience of doing it fits more with ritual magic summoning.
Absolutely.
Right? So I mean, I'm not seeing how this is really adding up to physical crafts of aliens being involved. The other thing is that some of the things that are described, like the sort of cybernetic craft, part bio, part tech, these basically what I call meat ships, right? So these meat ships now are involved. I mean, we got to the point where we've heard in UFO lore living ships, like the idea that they are sentient ships. People get taken. Sometimes the craft seem to be alive. Is a recurring story in experiencer cases, right? But also I've read that, not that long ago, I've read a few cases where there's these meat ships, but that they're reptilians. So, like, what's happening here? Because now we're getting told things like that. Chris Bledsoe, obviously he's a very well-known kind of experiencer.
Yeah, Chris.
He met.
Well,
he said he met with some of these people. He met with like Tom DeLonge and other people, and that they said that they wanted the reptilians in the story. So these stories seem to be pivoting into something. The mantids are here, reptilian meat ships. And apparently those body, Greer's or something, body parts are on some of these ships. So these are what the reptilian harvesting ships taking people. So we seem to be really going over the cliff here, into these really, let's be honest, the most fringe narratives.
Yeah, and something evil.
But yet they're getting spun as the strange thing, these are getting spun as almost like the most serious part of the story, but these are the most wackiest parts of ufology, and they are getting mixed now into what is now seen as the great hope, the most serious thing that like the nuts and bolts people are trying to. I think cognitive dissonance must be at play here, because on the one hand, it's like this is the nuts and bolts, this is the science, we're going to have proof. On the flip side, this is the wackiest stuff those people wanted nothing to do with in the topic. And now they have to do ritual summonings to get these reptilian meat ships to come. and blobs of light appear. I mean, I can't see I mean, I'll be honest, I can't see how the nuts and bolts people are going to survive that in their mind if they're saying all that other stuff was woo and it should be about technology, because this doesn't sound like, this sounds like Dungeons and Dragons now.
Yeah, he
where,
absolutely does.
I'm doing lightning hand summonings at you and stuff, and so and I'm being flippant because obviously I do accept there's all sorts of strange stuff. My story's full of paranormal stuff, aliens, but I can see that for a reasonable, let's say skeptical, critical thinker, like this is really on par with saying Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to do an ice spell summoning or so. I mean, like at what point do you say that wasn't what we were looking for? This is not the disclosure we were looking for, sort of thing. And yet at the moment it would seem it's extremely popular with all factions somehow. Now, so I don't know what you think about that, but I think it's a strange marriage.
To bring in psi abilities and bring in UFOs, because they're bringing all together. I mean, especially with, at least with Jake Barber and his team,
and the telepathy tapes, which pivoted into this.
Oh yes, it came at the same time, right? Or like a week before Jake Barber.
Not just the same time. They said the same scientist is on both teams.
You are kidding. I did not know that.
I'm not kidding.
Oh, wow.
No. So doesn't that start to feel a bit orchestrated to you as well?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Suddenly it knocks Joe Rogan off of the charts and everyone's thinking about psychic powers. And then bang, out comes this group that's doing psychic powers to call aliens. Bang, the same scientists on the team.
I feel like, and I don't want to say this, but I feel like even Jake Barber is whitewashing this a little bit, because I think maybe he went to the Greer event and he saw all these whistleblowers and he's like, I gotta, we have to fix this because it was all negative and the government's corrupt and I don't know. And this guy, he's a patriot and I feel he's trying to fix it because he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm leaving the legacy program behind, and I'm going to just do it myself." And because that's where all the corruption and evil and murder and whatever, and those black programs and keeping humanity, to not be able to progress and keeping this technology secret so we don't, advance, clean up the planet, or stop being have to pay for energy or whatever those reasons are. So I think he's trying to change that and whitewash what the program's been doing for the past 80 years. I hope I'm wrong.
Sure. Yeah, but also the other thing is, and again, I don't want to disparage anyone because of their life choices, because God knows everyone has done something wrong in their lives, and who wants to throw stones. But it does seem funny that assuming that there's these entities that want to make contact, that they seem so keen on contacting through either people who spent their whole lives as deception agents, disinformation agents, working seeking a deep state, or killers, murderers, really. I mean, like specialized murder units that would go out and assassinate people and murder people. So why are those the people that they want to work with so badly? Why? Because it should be a question mark, because these are the people that would do anything, if they're loyal, would do basically anything for you. Like, you need to whack a president or something, our helicopter's on its way. So like, for me, I have a problem because I think, I have an ambiguous life and I'm not sure what kind of entities would come if I spent all my time summoning. I don't know if I'd want to keep trying it, but like, I think that's something for, like, if you've lived a very pure, and you're that monk in the mountain who's spent your life on this, that you're quite confident if you open up something, that you're going to meet the divas or something. But it does seem odd that if there's this intelligent, why does it keep seeming to only be working with people that would be frightening people for most people to really think about it? These are be technically frightening people for you to have, in your normal life, been sitting in a room with, say, 20 of them. You'd be on edge, wouldn't you? I mean,
absolutely.
Ex-CIA people, ex-DARPA, ex-special units. You'd start to think, this is a bit like weird, and these are all the people, the beings they're like calling to work with them. I mean, exactly. I definitely have a question mark. And again, not because they're bad people, actually, they've moved on with their lives and stuff. But from that perspective, it seems odd. There's an intelligence seems to keep favoring people from things like DARPA that I think is like the evilest companies in the world, kind of organizations in the world, right? Yeah. Like the weirdest, kind of secret science making weapons to kill more and more people. That's what it does, right? So, why are these beings so interested? All these people. So I definitely have a question mark over that, and that's nothing against any one person. It's more about the whole thing. It seems at the moment that's who now we've been left with. The whole of disclosure seems to be dependent on a few dozen intelligence agents, ex-politicians and hired killers and stuff. And like doesn't that feel to you just like there's something odd in that we've come all the way from you don't trust the government and stuff to that's who disclosure is now? No, come on, move on.
And they're not really for disclosure, they want controlled disclosure. So yes, they're probably going to practice goes, yes, NHI are real, and these things, and that could be very helpful to humanity, in the
Sure.
state we're in. Just that thought alone.
Yes.
But when it comes to really breaking out of this system that we have, it's not going to change anything. That's
No,
what I mean.
and the other thing is without evidence. But people keep saying things like, "I've got
Yeah.
zero doubt. I'm 100% sure," but we're not presented anything. We keep getting these things repeated to us. We've had about 4 or 5 people in the same sort of network saying, "I've got zero doubt. It's 100% that aliens are here," but like they're not supplying us even the most basic objective evidence that this is the case.
Right,
It's just put to you as authorities telling you, now suck it up, Bobby, because this is real. So like, I'm an authority and it's 100% real, 100%. So again, I have a problem with that, because you should have this self-analysis to say, well, I believe it. I haven't really got any evidence I can give you, but I totally believe it. But I don't know. I can't objectively show it's real. I just totally believe it. But when person get 100%, zero doubt, for me, I have a problem, because even with my case, and I said, again, I've got the strongest evidence of anyone. I don't care. You can put anyone. The strongest evidence that there's actually real contact. I would still say I'm 99%, because maybe we live in some kind of virtual reality. Maybe I've been somehow brainwashed. Maybe the aliens are, I'd have to leave open a 1%, right? That there's just something unknown that I can't fathom, or I've made all these mistakes, somehow all these coincidences, and so I think once you get to that 100% as well, especially if you can't even, I'm showing you my working out process. Why has it got to a bit where I'm saying I'm 99% sure aliens have got here?
Right. 100% is really strange to say about anything.
Especially, if you can't give me some evidence, some, not even, I'm not saying, because people go proof. I'm not interested in proof. Proof is not a scientific concept. Proof is for maths and stuff, right? But in science, you should have very strong, compelling, objective evidence that would compel the reasonable person to agree with you. That's the standard, right? That's kind of a gold standard. It's the best explanation for the observed things that are happening, and for the observed evidence. We'll accept it as the strongest hypothesis. We can't prove it, because most things are unprovable. But you've got enough evidence to do that. But we're not even getting to the bottom bit, where it's here's that first piece of objective evidence that would start you to accept any of my argument, right? So I'm willing to go through physical material, genetic, traces, blah, 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 to show that there's a real phenomenon here that you can go and look at. You can say, is Bruce Fenton, he's talking about these HARs, are they even real? What's this tektite? Like I said, you can buy some tektites. I haven't made up tektites. I mean, so this stuff, you can debate whether I'm right in my interpretation, because you can see my evidence, Absolutely, this other thing is just trust me, bro, and it's believe it or not, and I'm an authority. And why would I lie? And that kind of, what we get put us is, why would these people lie? I don't need to know why someone does a crime for them to go to jail. That's not how things work, because you can be put in prison for murder and we'd never find out why you did it. You know what I mean? But we just know you did it. So I don't really care about people's motives. That is not an answer. Someone could lie to me for all kinds of reasons. What I want them is to show me something that means that they're not lying. You know what I mean? That's much easier than me trying to fathom out their brain. So there's these cop-out arguments. I think that people have to step back and say, absolutely no objective evidence has been presented for any of this story, any of it. At this point, right? At this point, when we're shown something, it's not at this point. No, even the video, the egg ship, wasn't even from the people that are involved.
It wasn't. Right? It wasn't. It was a different group or something. That
different people. Yeah, that just conveniently turned up at the right moment when News Nation needed some footage, and
they had
he's an ambitious at best. Nobody really knows what that. Again, like I said, if you were just to watch that in your, you were sitting at home, the news came on, and that came on. I bet the first thing you would probably thought was something there's a helicopter picking up some sort of storage tank, but you would not, without someone commentary telling you, have thought that was an alien spaceship. Not for a second. Right. So the fact is, this is all narrative, and that I have to be told what to think to make any of this into a story about aliens. So far, every bit of evidence requires someone to keep telling me that it's alien evidence. Right? If I was now I would see nothing.
Yeah, and now venture capital came in, right? That's what Skywatcher is. It's venture capital working with government, so it's non-government agencies and corporate and government. Now, okay, we'll give them a chance. So now, if they actually bring in a craft, this egg-shaped craft, will people believe it? I bet they still won't. I mean, even me, I might think maybe these are reverse engineered crafts that we want to bring into society. So this is like a good way of bringing them in. Unless
yeah, and
I
that's
go,
the thing is, it does take. I think it takes more than one thing. I think like a lot of people say, yeah, that if the only thing really that would do it is like the aliens landing on the White House. Look, it's almost like that because yeah, like any other singular piece of evidence, you can dispute, and that's again why I say there's no such thing as proof. Because yeah, yes, you can have the best video in the world, and someone else will just always believe it's AI, and it's just the best AI, and that no, I'm not having it. This is just the best AI. Or you can have an object, like you see something in front of you, and you think, yeah, it's just the government, So it is very difficult to get to. Again, these are just the building blocks of evidence that we should not be going from 0 to it's 100% when we haven't had the things that you could debate, where you could say, well, that one, it seems like it's a spaceship. I'm not sure, but it's quite convincing. What about that? They've also got this video. Yeah, well, yeah, that's quite convincing. And eventually you'd get enough where you say, someone say, on balance, do you think their evidence points to aliens? You'd say, well, on balance, yeah, I think, they've given me 4 or 5 different things that are all really weird. And, they're saying that they're aliens. So I think that they really are, I might be wrong, but I'm convinced. I want to be convinced. I don't want to be just told what to think. I want to be convinced.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I get tired of people just telling me to believe it.
Yeah, it's all pieces of the puzzle, and I think your book lays a very strong foundation for something that occurred in our past, something that was in the atmosphere that crashed, and then with changing our DNA at that exact or throughout that time. So there's objective evidence of something happening in our past, right? That was in the atmosphere and also changed our DNA for the better. And usually in an instance where it'll be extinction level if you mess it up. But we've also been the dominant species. There are stories in all cultures kind of to this case, right? Where God created
there's cultural stories around the world saying that, if you look at a lot of, say, the indigenous American groups, for example, they say that, even specifically saying the Pleiades as being to do with their ancestry. You've got several groups like Cree and stuff. You've got, I think it's another group that say similar thing, that their ancestors came from there. I think the Cree in Canada say about a wormhole. It's kind of like there's a hole in the great web in the sky where Grandmother Spider like opened up this tunnel, which basically like a wormhole, and that it connected to the Pleiades, and that these beings came through there. So you've got these like stories. Again, in Aboriginal Australia, there's 7 Sisters dreaming lore, which is across like all the cultures of Australia. Several of them say that their ancestors are from space. That humans were made by the Altaringa beings. You go around the world, and there's Asian stories. There's stories in the Amazon jungle from people telling you these. So yeah, there's loads of cultures that say that there is a star ancestry to humans, and in some cases specifically reference the Pleiades. But that alone, of course, wouldn't be enough. But of course, it is amazing to find that then all the things that has the best evidence is a story linking like a wormhole to the Pleiades, ancestry of Pleiades with the changes. So of course, yeah, it's super cool to then have all that, because this is when you get the anecdotal evidence was already there, but the anecdotal evidence isn't enough, to convince anyone who doesn't want to just have anecdotal evidence. But now that we're getting objective evidence, and again, it doesn't mean it's proof. You'll never get to prove. I can never prove that this happened. I've got no intention to do that because it's impossible. But I think that we can get to a point now where we say, yes, the anecdotes were quite compelling. A lot of people believed it already. Now we've got enough objective evidence for this case to say that on balance, it seems very likely that this happened, and it explains the anomalies that we're seeing better than any of the other hypotheses that have been offered. So in a normal case, you'd accept that as the conventional hypothesis, and it would become the theory. But because it's so like anomalous and it's so outside of our comfort zone and it's paradigm changing, the resistance isn't so much about the science, it's about human beings and about the paradigm that we're in, which is fighting to preserve itself, which is all paradigms do. So you'll basically have, I could sit down with a scientist who is in these fields, say in tech, although we'd be using the same data, we would be talking past each other, because I'm already compelled to it being, an interstellar object, most likely a craft. He is already married to the idea that this is an impact. So he's going to be looking to reach for different ways to keep explaining this as an impact. And I'm going to be trying to argue that, look, no, your ways don't match up to the, but we're unlike to change each other's minds. What actually happens is it's the audience who either changes their mind or stays. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Let's put it this way. It doesn't matter what the tech experts thinks. It doesn't matter what the geneticist thinks. It matters about the people who are listening to the debate and what they
Absolutely.
think, because the only people that are going to change their mind is the audience. I'm not going to change my mind at this point. That guy's not going to change his mind, because we've got to a point where the evidence has compelled us so strongly that we have a conviction. So short of something radically changing in the evidence, neither of us is likely to change our opinion. That's just the reality. Okay. But you listening, you get the opportunity to listen to these two stories that you're not particularly married to. You maybe didn't even give a crap about tektites, you've never even heard of them. And you're just going to think, well, he's got good points, and at some point you'll come down on one side or the other. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way paradigms change, is if enough people come down on the side that I'm on, the other paradigm collapses, because people don't give a crap what he's saying anymore. We've already decided it was the spaceship. Now, like, get out, you're boring us, so it's kind of like that. And that's what happens in all scientific paradigms, is there's a point where it will just slide. Like I said, usually paradigms change because the old generation dies off and the younger generation grew up with a new story, right?
Yeah, this younger generation are amazing. I mean,
if you look at it now, people are more into UFOs and aliens. So you can talk to younger scientists who are like, to be honest, I'm really into UFOs. If it wasn't for my my 80-year-old boss who's saying that no, that's just rubbish, that they would probably be investigating UFOs, right? So that's where
look at our government. Look at the U.S. government. The U.S. government is they're just walking corpses. It's really sad to say, it's depressing.
Yeah, I mean, look at the drone stuff that was going on in New Jersey. We were all obsessed about this past December and beyond, and they finally came out and said, "Oh yeah, no, they were just drones. They were testing them, and we're supposed to just completely forget about all of the crazy stuff that everyone was seeing during that time."
Yeah,
all approved by the FAA.
Drone ships and stuff.
Yeah. And there was compelling evidence, not evidence. Sorry, I mean video showing strange craft, doing just crazy stuff above New Jersey, and I think it's still happening. So, but
apparently it's still happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. The drone case is good because you've got how the government is, and it's just the authority is speaking now. You all mad or whatever, and it's gone. And even though they themselves have told you, like divisions government telling you, that there may be Iranian drone ships or there may be Chinese surveillance, that bases in the UK also were having drone incursions. That wasn't even tackled, right? So US bases in the UK, what were those ones then? Because then they're saying they all FAA approved. Well, what was going over the bases at Rendlesham and stuff? So that's just gone, and it's like, well, that's gone now. Move on. News cycles changed. Which is unfortunately, again, it is a problem, because look how these stories just are spinning by, because it's like, well, now a helicopter's hit something, so forget about that. So we have that as another problem, is that also that we're living in like a super wacky time, like super wacky, where like the news, if you tried to like process and keep up the news cycle, you probably end up kind of having a psychosis, because there's just so much wacky stuff that if you were to really try and hang on to each story and where it goes, you'd be in all places at once. So again, that's kind of working to stop people going too deep into any of this as well. Because I mean, look at the UFO thing. This is what's happened here, and we were a few weeks ago it'd be immaculate conception, secret program. And it's like that's gone now. Now it's drone meat ships. And there's no
summoning craft.
There's no follow up. There's no conclusion. We never saw a single document from immaculate conception, even though it was there in a congressional hearing. Not one document showing it was real was produced. It's basically there was an essay. They handed in an essay. Some anonymous person had written saying that it was a real program. No, nothing from that program. No person from it. Nothing. Just an essay, an anonymous essay. And the other, and then that one, and the actual guy that came in to talk about it, obviously, Schellenberger, he didn't even have any document about it.
Nope.
He gave in like a weird, really long essay of UFO stuff, just like random UFO stuff that he'd been learning, obviously, while he's nothing to do with the program he was there for.
Schellenberger doesn't usually do that. He usually vets everything, or he has at least three sources, he said, for everything he gets. So it was very strange. But apparently it was Corbell, right? Because he's made a stink about it, that he didn't get the limelight.
But at least I suppose, it's so funny because Corbell's document, at least it was on the topic, whereas Schellenberger's one was just like a really long set of like UFO notes, and like I don't know if you looked at it, it's like pages and pages of just little notes about ufology and ancient, and alien contacts, and totally incoherent, and like a lot of people point out, a lot of it wrong, like stuff that you could just, if you looked into it properly, was wrong, but nothing that actually was about this program that he was supposedly invited to talk about. So we've never had anything substantiating there ever was this program, and then it's just dropped from the news cycle, and now ufology and aliens contact is onto some other stuff, and that keeps happening, isn't it? We've seen that continually happening really since TTSA and the whole 2017 story, and the way that story has morphed. We now know that Lou Elizondo wasn't really the director of a program called ATIP.
Crazy.
It wasn't really real, that wasn't real, and that the journalists that wrote the article admitted that basically they edited out all the weird stuff because they didn't want people to think it was too wacky, because obviously it was super wacky. The thing was looking at werewolves, the real program was looking at werewolves and stuff, and
werewolves. Wow.
Well, yeah, because they were seeing Walker Ranch, didn't they? They were saying there was like a weir monster.
Oh, yes, that's
there was
right.
Beaver monster. There was like ghost following people. So, if they'd put that in that first article, like who in the general public would have followed that story? I mean, nobody. It would have just gone to the bottom. It would have gone to the bottom of the website, and people just think, is this the April Fool's article, or what's going on here? So it was all very skillfully done to manage the message. And to get TTSA up and going, and then obviously Elizondo was on that. And then that was going to build us a spaceship. Don't forget, that was building us a spaceship.
Yes, people invested money in that.
Spaceship go, yeah, right. Yes. People invested money into that. They were going to build some sort of warp drive thing, and then it just stopped talking about that, and it was just doing books and movies. Right, that was gone. Yeah, and it's gone. Like in South Park. And then they go to the spaceship, and it's gone.
And it's gone.
Right. So the money's gone. The spaceship's gone. And we've seen that repeatedly happening. There's a new in story. It doesn't go anywhere, and it's gone. Yeah. Right. New story. It's gone. Right. So we've gone for that since 2017 to now, where now just as people were losing hope, it's like there is another.
Right. There's always another.
Right. And then in comes these new heroes and saviors of disclosure, conveniently in the background, who now looks more like we're webbed with everyone else. The network they were always in some way part of this network.
News Nation,
and News Nation, And the other thing is interesting is Greer is now brought back in from the cold, because it was meant to be like a separate group, but now it's kind of merging it, because through Coulthard, who's obviously more to do with Mellon and everyone else, and Elizondo, that through him, Greer is kind of being brought back into the conversation as part of this one. This isn't separate anymore. It's C5 and Greer and them as well, and these new people, and it's just merging it. And with the telepathy tapes people, you start to think, God, it's just one big collective. Now you've got all the billionaires now from SALT, they're all funding it, and you've got so now we just have this really, if you really zoom out, you've now got this really wacky kind of collective of all these SALT kind of financiers and billionaires. You've got Greer and C5, and you've got these super soldiers, psychic super soldiers, and Elizondo, and Coulthard, and the journalists and the media companies, and this guy that's making the movie. It turns out he's the agent for half these people, and he's making these movies for them. And then you start thinking, because someone said, why was Gold at the hearing? Well, because Gold's in that movie, but we didn't know that this was PR for a movie that was coming up. So you know what I mean? You start to realize, oh my God, this is much more orchestrated than we even thought. That this is behind, when they start behind the scenes, if we behind the scenes, you'd realize that all of these people were connected the whole time, and that they all had a different time to kind of come on stage, but that behind it, there's always been a kind of a framework, and that there's super connectivity behind.
There's one thing we're really good at in the US, and that's psyops, and well orchestrated psyops,
Oh yeah.
This is very well. I even if you're not to call it psyop, it's certainly a very well orchestrated plan for something, even if it is to bring a real alien for something, whatever it is, for something. And that the organization and the funding, I think we're really talking about at this point, unlimited, bottomless pockets, where this can potentially be funded to do anything, make their Hollywood movies and build, I don't know, at least pretend spaceships, or there's the money to do that now involved in this. And apparently the US government is okay with this narrative, whether they're officially involved. There's a tacit green light to just go for it, because they've done the hearings. You've got certain politicians that are thumbs upping this, that this is good thing to do, this disclosure stuff. So even if it's not directly the US government officially, we definitely seeing a green light to go on these stories. You know what I mean? So so it's very interesting as to what everyone feels they're going to get out of this.
It's crazy watching it.
It is crazy watching it. And it's, again, a bit like my story we said earlier, you know, jumping the shark and having too much in it. It has got to that point now where, yeah, it is the mantids, the meat ships, the psychic warriors, the, you know, the billionaires doing rituals in the woods with naked women or something at this party and summoning blue orbs. I mean, so it does feel a bit like that, where it's like it's now everything is being thrown in, you know, whereas before it was supposed to be a slow drip disclosure, we kept hearing and all this. But it seems like at some point someone has just said, pull the lever. You know, this hasn't gone how we want it. Pull the damn lever. Let's let everything out, because, you know, the other stuff hasn't stuck or hasn't done enough. So apparently, or hasn't gone fast enough for some reason, or there's been some kind of change. I mean, someone suggested to me, I think it was friend Tupa, he was saying that he thought because a lot of these things had failed, that there'd been a lot of narratives that didn't really make the impact that that kind of network had thought. And so now it's almost gone like, well, we're gonna have to do a lot bigger. Let's go really big.
That makes sense. It looks like, yeah, they start with something, they see how it works. If it fizzles out, then they try something else, because it is morphing, right? And they keep trying something new. And now it does seem so corporate, like you said. Salt is in there, and you know, it's the Sky Warriors and summoning craft. It just feels so corporate, and it might be because, and this is my opinion, that as a country, you know, as an empire, it's and it's declining. And I think they're trying to think of something new to revive it or bring out something. If you think about it, if really trillions of dollars have gone into this, those are assets that you've invested in. You know, if you want to, it makes sense to bring them out and try to revive the empire, I guess. So
there's definitely got to be. I mean, it's uncannily timed with, there's kind of the diminishing of elements of the US empire, and also the pivot into technocracy, which really is a whole new kind of governmental system where the idea really is AI replacing people. Doge coming in saying all these government people need to go. Why? Because an AI is going to be doing a lot of this stuff, right? We don't need those bureaucrats sitting in those places anymore. They're gone. Because the AI will just work out if you have this done or that done. And the idea really is, you will have a centralized global AI at some point who really is their like AI god or AI king. But initially, though, you're going to make a lot of sweeping changes. And one of those, I think, has always been hinted at in conspiracy law, is the creation of a new religion to go with a new world order.
Doesn't that coincide with like the Antichrist and on Revelations, and so I mean, is it?
Yeah, are they following?
Yeah, are they following the script, or is it really?
Why not? You're going to get like a couple, 2-3 billion people on side straight away. That this is at least to feel that they're in a flow that is meant to be happening. So if you can kind of bring in that kind of Judeo-Christian element to it, that this is kind of the revelation, the end times, and so you're leveraging that with these sorts of war, disease, you're bringing all those narratives out massively. So there's a feeling of that we are at that point where the great revelation is coming, and that there's going to be this pivot into a new, and like it's what the golden age, they're telling us now, this is the new golden age. Like the things that they're saying, I mean, this is just unprecedented, right? Where presidents talk about you're now in the golden age, like totally like new agey kind of stuff. And at the same time, you've got the technocrats who've all been brought in. They were all there standing behind Trump, like all the top technocrats. And like they're all here in the government now. And the AI is going to like revolutionize. Was it Project Stargate is going to bring the AI? And you're like, okay, this is like, something's going on here, So I think we can't separate this from that. And I do think that the religious side is definitely there. That we're being told now that Scientology is involved, that maybe the Mormons are involved. Obviously, Nation of Islam has been merging with Scientology lately. So all these UFO groups are kind of involved in the background. That there is and some of the obviously Christian sects and stuff. But I think we're definitely seeing here is the seeding of a new version of existing religions, which is going to incorporate these you talk about angels and demons, don't they, as well? Even in this latest project, they've said, some of the psionics think of them as like angels and demons. So he said that it's in our faces that this is getting pivoted into also a religious kind of framework, or as Diana Pasolka would say, a religiosity to this, right? So it's kind of the framework is being put in place that so that should, summonings and stuff, these kind of spiritual, that you're going into these spiritual kind of settings at these spiritual seminar retreat places and holding hands naked in the stream, calling the spirit people, come on, man. I mean, it's a little bit religious here. And
Right.
so, I mean, we think like that. And I do think, that we are seeing the kind of a techno-spiritual religious system for techno-spiritual kind of people,
For
like the
sure.
Silicon Valley elite and their DMT smoking ways, that this is perfect. It's going to be like spaceships and blue orbs and it's DMT. And, we're going to bring it all together, man. And we're going to have this like religion that goes with our new AI, dominion. So like, that's why I think we're seeing it go just completely wacky, is because that does fit. It's the Burning Man people, and they're like, yeah, let's go all in on this new great paradigm of transformation, and DMT, and the spirit elves are going to come out, they're going to join in with us as well. And so whether that's all sane or not is a big question, but it's
something to look out for. People need to be wary of it, because it's strange. And I think we have Trump and Musk and these guys coming in. It's like they're trying to still make it acceptable, because it's not like the agenda's changed. Their faces have changed, because they did try this during COVID of bringing this system in, but people rejected it outright, completely rejected it. But it looks like now, or at least they're trying to make this make it more acceptable to at least.
Well, that's the beauty of AI algorithms, that they learn. So they've got all that big data from lockdowns and COVID and our responses and what we fought back on and things like that, and it's now learned what. So it's throwing out, how do you get around that? So now, like for example, you flood the borders of Europe and the US, and then say we need digital IDs. We need to track and trace everybody. So because if you can't get it with a disease, get it with immigrants, get it with war, get it with something else. Use the things which one can we leverage next? We're seeing now, okay, you just pivot it and say, well, you don't want unknown Mexican cartels just walking into the country, do you? Like, you've got to trace those people. Christ, are you anti-American? But it's like, well, like someone said, but what were all these agencies doing when tens of thousands of apparently cartel members and terrorists walked into the country, and then they're telling you they're there, so you are tracking them, right? Because you're telling us there's like 10,000 of them. So why didn't you do anything about it then? You know what I mean? But then you're told, now we're going to have to do something about it. So we'll have to give you all these ideas. So you can definitely see that there's been a full-on plan to relaunch all of that stuff back at us. So now it's going to be sold as it's saving Europe and saving America from the great collapse of too many immigrants and all this stuff, right? So these things are not all separated. We see they're
definitely connected. Connected.
Never let a crisis go to waste, right?
No,
isn't that insane?
And the horror of this is that they took all our data from the last few years, and the AI is just crunched through it all and is just throwing out what to do next. So we're in a new era where it's not as simple as having to outthink a kind of retarded politician.
Right?
Right. So now they'll get their top super AI to like tell them what they need to do to make this work. So that's the kind of the frightening bit, is that you're now up against tools, and that's not to say we don't have tools that can push back, but it is more difficult. Yes, and they have big data that we don't have. Big data, they have huge data. They have bigger systems, so it's definitely going to be interesting times. Throwing this stuff into the mix as well, it does obviously it's a bit of a distraction, but I don't think it's used just as a distraction, because it's not a big enough distraction for 8 billion people. You know what I mean? It's only at the moment, particularly, most of the really strange stuff is within the echo chamber.
It is.
Right? So unless this broke out into all media platforms and channels were covering this, at the moment it seems to be like News Nation and what's the one that Greer's on? News
one news, no, not news, wait,
American One, news something,
OAN, like I think One American News, OAN,
right? So I think there's a couple that he's on, and then there's a couple of these people on, you know what I mean? So it's kind of insular, like these are not like all the other news platforms. So like at the moment it doesn't seem to got there. Now the interesting is to see what has to happen for this to become more like a global story, or at least a totally like US wide focus, because for now I'd say it's still a bit niche, even though they've done the hearings and stuff. I'm sure most people, if you ask them, wouldn't really be up to date on what's happening in that topic. They might have heard of the hearing or right. So something would have to happen to really pivot this into like a major mainstream story, so that's why I think is to watch and see, because either they have to make like a craft come, like really something happens, or that the aliens blew up a jet or something, or there has to be something like that where we're shown a video, a US fighter jet on fire, or the aliens have hit something, there has to be something that pivots this so that it's big news, everyone's watching again, and that this time it becomes a focal thing for the US,
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, no one believes the whole terrorist thing anymore. Anyway, everyone just laughs at it, because even with the New Jersey drones, when they came out saying it's Iran, everyone just laughed and dismissed it. Yeah. So no one that is not working anymore. So I think it's going to have to be something like Alien or NHI to get whatever they want done.
So where do you? I mean, I'll ask you both, and what do you think that you expect from this new organization, and also media-wise, where you see it going next?
I mean, for me, Jake Barber. I liked his long form interview. I mean, I like what they're doing, right? Like, he wants to give evidence to people. He wants to show a crowd. He wants, just to give evidence. I'm still skeptical though, because the ones pushing it are still very connected to Peter Thiel, and that network, and that guy. We know he's very into government, and he's very close to Musk as well. And Donald Trump. So we just have to be very careful of this. Yes, if they can prove to us and most of the population that NHI are real, and that we have these technologies, I think that's a positive thing. But it doesn't mean we let them do whatever they want, with whatever control agenda they have.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty pessimistic view of what's going to happen. I feel like they're going to turn this into some sort of entertainment feed. Like, oh, what's going on with the aliens? Let's turn over, let's go to this thing on YouTube. Let's go to this thing on cable. And you can listen to all these quote unquote experts say, oh, we met the aliens and they're super chill and they like Subway sandwiches, only $5, at your local Subway. Like, I think it's going to turn into some sort of advertising or, marketing scheme. It's just to keep it separate and to capitalize on it, I think is going to be the, I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Again,
big money,
a very pessimistic view, but
big money is coming.
Island, where it just goes on with the Oak Island effect of just this ongoing thing where no evidence, nothing's found, but it's presented well, it's engaging. There's this nice plot that, one day you'll get to the bottom of the pit and we'll find the Templar treasure or whatever, but it never quite gets there. And tune in next week and the alien will have more to say, that kind of thing in it, where it's which it has been, that's what it's been building to, isn't it? This kind of just follow this story. There's, whenever it gets a bit dull, there's a plot twist. So don't worry, buckle up, it's all coming, it's round the corner. Ooh,
as long as you buy our next book.
Right, get the hat, get the book, come to the movie, get
the documentary.
Make sure to sponsor this, and to so all of that as well alongside it, and to feel that you're part of it, that in some way that it's drawing.
And that way, it's kind of a religion then, that way, right? But the religion, I mean, the church is the media, and again, right, and it'll be the documentaries, and then you'll have the priests, which is the whistleblowers like Ozando and those guys. And
potentially, if it's going to be more and more coming together to do C5, you'd even have congregation. Because you're going to be standing in the field with all the other weirdos, right? conjuring up these blue, whatever they are,
Yeah, we don't know.
Not knowing really why you're doing it, because you've been pulled into this story, and at some point you think, why am I standing in a field conjuring up blue amorphous blobs? How did my life take that turn? But we know that that's how these things happen. You don't see the slide till you're like nearly the bottom, because it's difficult. And again, I say that as a weirdo. I say that as a weirdo.
Me too.
We're right there with you.
Yeah, so that's fine. But I just know that for people somewhere, there's going to be that at some point in the back of their head, and how did I get here? How did I get here? And hopefully not when it's too late. And I don't know, the blue blob is flying into your body. I don't know. Where is that stuff going? Because where's that stuff going? I don't know. I do know that I don't want to be part of something that maybe is invoking unknown entities to go into into my consciousness or whatever, 'cause I don't know where the end of that story is, right? And I don't know if they are real and they are targeting these people, and if they are doing all this, what is their agenda? Because that's the other side of it, is that even if we say this is all real that these beings, they've called on all these military and CIA people to manipulate us into doing these CI files, or and to go along with all this. So we stand in the field and summon them. Then what? What do they want?
Yeah.
What the hell do they want with us? What are they doing this for? Because
that's I'm surprised no one's asking this question. Like, then what? All right, so
then what?
Yeah.
Once they turn up, what is it that we're meant to do with them? Because I personally think the mass arrival of an alien race is the single most frightening thing that would happen to humanity. I mean, I know that people say it'd be great to make contact. I agree, but I think there are stages to that. I'm quite happy with this. That, like I say, we've had some interaction with what I believe to be some kind of non-human intelligence, that they're giving us evidence they existed. Do you know what? I'm comfortable at that pace. If they just turn up in the skies, enormous ships covering our planet, I would see that as a very aggressive introduction, a very frightening introduction.
For sure.
So when people say that they want them to come, be careful what you wish for, because I can't think of anything more destabilizing to our planet than that happening. And the fear, the terror, the abject terror for everyone of not knowing what those ships are doing here, right? Yeah. So I don't necessarily want that, but even a level down from that, I don't know if I want blue blobs appearing everywhere. And I don't know if I do. I mean, you have to stop doing something. Think, I'm not sure that that's what we need right now. And that I tell you one, like, I know we're going quite long, but I tell you one of the things that does concern me with the AI thing as well is that there is a really interesting article by a scientist who's now at NASA. Anyway, I forgot his name, but he wrote a book. On aliens, SETI, and all this stuff. And basically, so one of the concepts that he's talked about is the idea that obviously most of alien life, alien civilizations, if they have been around a lot longer than us, that they almost certainly have created robots and AI and robot ships and all that stuff. Right. The other thing is that they have almost certainly become largely post-biological, and that could include up into uploading a basic replica of their consciousness into their AI tools, their ships, the robots, whatever. They may be gone. They may be now existing only as the echo in all of this AI, right? He said, okay, but there's another concept here. What if it's possible to return from that cyber world and to download back into biology? What if you want to return to the biological world? Because maybe it turns out it's not all it's cut up to be.
I'm sure it's not.
And you realize that we don't really like this. We want to go back to being when we had bodies and we had these sensory experiences and stuff. Like, how might they do that? Might they encourage a planet to build some kind of strange centralized AI called the Stargate? They're calling it. They can build this thing called Project Stargate now, right? Which is a centralized AI, and we're supposed to be moving into this fourth industrial revolution where we will not just have networked technology, but we will be the internet of bodies. We're going to have embedded technologies, brain chips linked to the AI. Well, doesn't that sound like the start of the project where you then beam back down? Where you now have the access into all these bodies, and you now write yourself back over them. That your plan to return to the biological world, network these idiot apes, and just download back into them. Because that's the sort of thing that in the back of my mind frightens me.
That is so valid. It is so valid because if these things were kind of gifts, even these in the legacy program, a lot of these things they say are gifted, or even shot down. Maybe they're allowed to be shot down. Wouldn't that, like, to more on your point here? Wouldn't that nudge then this civilization to go down a path which is a technology that you can control or you can communicate with because it's yours to begin with, right? So then down the path, then you can come in here and just take over the place.
And there's hints as well about these, again, the cybernetic ships, that these are living ships, supposedly, these meat ships. So maybe the beings are the ships. Maybe there's a point when they've gone through an enhanced technological evolution where they gradually went beyond and became a merger of their technology and then decided to move into space, taking on the bodies of starships and becoming starships, and that you've actually engineered this merger, and so that's why you've got these part flesh, part technology crafts that are in some way alive. Like, what the hell is going on here? Because that starts to sound ominously like that vision that I'm describing. That are we in contact with something like that? That is something that, and it's deciding that it wants to come back. Because, like, that would fit in with all these ideas of, like, possession law and other things that come from our ancestors. So we have to be very careful that are we invoking in, and opening the door to something beyond our wildest nightmares again? And I'm not trying to fry anyone, but
it's perfect
there's
timing.
an element there.
Yeah, definitely.
It just happens it's when they're going to build the centralized AI Stargate. What?
Yes.
Hang on a minute. That when they said that, there was a bit of me with that thought in the back of my mind already that was quite destabilizing, because I thought, well, that just sounds exactly like what you would say if you're doing that. Almost like we're going to put it right up front because nobody knows what we're doing. We can almost laugh in your faces and say we're going to have the AI Stargate project, and we're just going to open the gate, and we're just going to come back, and we're going to come into your Internet of Bodies and your Internet of Things and just take over the whole darn thing. Now, I'm not saying it is that, again, because it's an extraordinary scenario, but we're dealing with narratives here that are equally as extraordinary as that. Meat ships with body parts on them, apparently, and and people's in the woods summoning orbs. So we've got to a point where that thought in the back of my mind is not more extraordinary than what I'm being told on News Nation. Wow, it's just a creepy bit of that.
Man, it's gonna be a crazy few years. I mean, I'm just we are in this, right? The three of us. I mean, I'm saying, like, we understand. We watch the news about it. We talk about it. We philosophize about it. But most people don't. So could you imagine, like, when something really does happen, or even just listening to someone like Bilge giving. Talking about mantids. If you're just a normal person watching that is just really scary. Like, for us, we've heard these stories before, so we've gone through that. But psychologically,
and like I said, the guy that had this, like, he's so trusted that he was in control of, like, nuclear weapons and stuff. And that, it's like a top DARPA scientist, and that he's there working at air bases doing the drone human interface stuff and all that stuff, right? And that guy is saying, the aliens are here. Mantis has been in my bedroom, biting my face, and it's got to that point where if you were just like, I don't know, you didn't know this stuff, and your friend said, "Come on, sit down, watch some News Nation." You're like, you're watching it, thinking, what is happening? What's happening here?
I think that's what movies are for. You sit your friends down who really aren't about the subject, and you show them Independence Day, and then you show them the Terminator movies, and you go, look, this is the future, this is what's happening.
But the thing is, that shouldn't have to be the build up to watching a regular news channel.
For sure.
Like, I'm going to have to gradually acclimatize you to News Nation, because it's not what you're used to. You better watch a few of these movies first, and then watch the news. So you're ready. You're ready for it. Because, I mean, how did we get to that? Do you know what I mean? How did we get to that? You've got to be pretty ready for the latest cross-quarter heart, announcement on these days.
What is he going to do next? Like, how do you top this? Because they always have to top it. I mean, I don't think he can, unless it's just going to be a craft landing. Well, Jake Barber showing something and his team.
But it seems like, I'll say this, it does seem like the brakes are off, doesn't it? That they're not really at the point where they're trying to do slowly. So if that's the case, basically pick your meme from ufology lore or alien contact lore at this point. Because did you see Louis Ondo was in an interview the other day, and he was saying that the beings are attracted to gold, the UAP attracted to gold. Well, here we go. That's the Anunnaki stories, isn't it? So now they said they were attracted to uranium and gold mines, and that they seem to have some interest in gold and stuff. So that is straight out of the Anunnaki stuff, and Sitchin, which of course is super popular and almost became a kind of religion in itself, has a whole cult following. So like now they're going to bring in the Sitchin cult following by saying that these are those beings that love the gold. Remember them, the Anunnaki. I think so. Don't be surprised if next week we need to talk about some other things. And today we'll be talking about the Sumerians and their culture, because there's these Anunnaki,
and the Sumerians. And the Sumerians. Oh my God, I can't imagine. And the Sumerians are loosely going into the Abrahamic faith, well, because of Stitcher too. He said that Noah's in there, and all the stories are in the Bible. And then we have what's happening in Israel. I bet you they're going to build that third temple. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop.
No, they're not going to stop. So I mean, that's I'm open-minded to that. I think we're going to see now they're going to basically be harvesting all of the strangeness from the wider fields of ufology and ancient aliens, and it's just going to be all getting brought into this story. Because I honestly think if you're willing to bring in the living cybernetic ships and the
Yeah.
psychic super soldiers calling them. Like,
Right.
really, you're willing to say anything, aren't you,
Mhm,
now at that point?
mhm.
Because those are really on the edges of the fringe. So, where you can do everything. So the other thing, of course, abductions, again, we've touched on a bit. So I would expect to see a bit more on abductions getting pulled in as well, that we might be seeing some more. Because we've been told in the past that for example, that he was the former CIA guy that's at TTSA, that apparently he's had an abduction.
Who Hal put off? Or there's
No,
Kit Green also.
no, the one who was I've forgotten his name. He was like
Is it Sammy Venn? That guy?
Yeah. So he apparently has had some kind of abduction. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to hear more about these backstories for people like that. Now you need to know about exactly what happened in Jim Semivan's abduction and how this CIA director was, encountered these aliens in his room with his wife. And so I think we might start to see things like this abduction story brought back more into home, that these characters have hinted at it. I mean, Gary Nolan has said that he's had some kind of interaction with young, but he's talked about that already. But that could be News Nation material. So could Semivan. So could some of these other people. I think you're going to find that most of these people as well are experiencers, right? Because why are they doing this?
Yeah,
I think
that's part of it.
Or they are convinced because they're around so many other people that are experiencers. Because all these other people around CIA people are saying, we've seen the beings, we've had the experiences. So I think we're going to see more of those stories start to come out, and those are going to include some super wacky stuff that people are going to be sold it, because it's like, well, these are credentialed people, they're super credentialed people. Why would they say it? So on and so on.
Our government trusts them. Yeah.
Right. So so I think that's very likely. What we don't see, of course, is any of these kind of influential people and their platforms having any conversation with me. If you sort of think it's kind of funny. Well, in some ways it's not, in some ways it is. But you'd think, these people that are desperately looking for evidence of aliens to share with the public, I've been talking about for like 7 years.
Very strange. And I thought it was strange too.
They all know that I talk about this. It's not secret. Being like Coast to Coast and Ancient Aliens. So there's no secrets. You got to think to yourself, why wouldn't you want me at least for content? Well, perhaps because my narrative actually doesn't fit yours and it counters it in some ways, right? So there's a problem. There's obviously a glaring problem why they can't say, well, let's just get Bruce to talk about it. He seems to have some evidence. Why don't we use that? Which would be the obvious logical, even if you were grifting, right? You'd be like, well, someone else has got evidence. Right, you're bringing in the Anunnaki, you're bringing in all this other stuff. Why not that guy that's always gone on about he's got ship and because he doesn't fit the story? I'm an inconvenient person.
I think though, if they're bringing in the ancient stuff, when they bring the ancient stuff, they have to bring you in to talk about it.
Absolutely.
I don't think they will. If they've avoided it this long, I don't think so.
Maybe not News Nation, but maybe if like, I don't know, if NBC ever
News Nation has had half of ufology on, even people that we've barely heard of have been on there for interviews. Right?
Oh, that's right. With Ross. Yeah, how come Ross hasn't reached out? That's very strange, huh?
He's had a lot of people. I have contacted him in the past. It was definitely that there was no real interest in it. So again, that made me realize in hindsight, he didn't really want to read the paper. It was always like, oh, can you just better summarize? I sent him the paper and everything. Summarize it, sort of thing. But I realized that in hindsight, because there already is a thing that they're doing. It's not looking for evidence. There's a whole thing in place. Because I also had contact in the past, I hadn't put it together because at the beginning, I reached out to people like Corbell and TTSA, and there's always been like just this weird sort of no interest, blah, blah. And then you start to actually in hindsight, because there's already a thing. They're not really about. It's not about evidence. But there's a narrative. So if you're outside that narrative, you're really not of any interest, because it's not about looking for evidence. It's about selling a particular narrative, and that if you're not in it. Particularly, not only you're not in it, but could counter it. Right? And so imagine that my evidence doesn't fit with where this conclusion is meant to go. Then that's super inconvenient.
I mean, if I put my conspiracy hat on, it would be that these evil entities that still run the place. It looks like don't want this narrative to come out. Because it is a countering one.
That might be a little bit inconvenient for them, isn't it? That there's
absolutely
shows that actually that you shouldn't trust any of this story,
right?
because the deceivers are still in control, and that who's most likely to be put on all the news stories? Is it the guy that's under their wing or the competing group?
And that's why it's all intelligence and community guys and
Yep.
Right. So you start to get the flavor of that's why, and that's why I was like, at some point I went, aha, yeah, of course they can't talk to me. Like, of course they can't,
Mhm.
because it's an opposing group's staff, if you like. Because I sometimes do sort of refer to like the the upper management team or the admin department, which is 400 light years away. Because obviously I recognize that this has been structured not by me. Like you said, you've heard my story. This was not something I could have done on my own. This has been cobbled together by something else, which has a broader view and has manipulated events to ensure that I am put into places where I needed to be to understand this. That there's no way any of this would have happened otherwise. Like all the weird stuff and weird police units and strange meetings and all sorts of weird stuff. So I'm aware that clearly, ever since the day that I went to that site in Egypt, something else has been doing stuff, and it's that something clearly not on the same team as the something that's doing all this other stuff, which currently controls the entire narrative in this field. And that there's definitely the sense is there is two opposing groups. We keep hearing about angels and demons, and
there it is.
Yeah.
It's right there in your face. And it's like, okay, if there's these two parties, where's the other one?
Right. Where's the other one? It's definitely a spiritual war going on.
Right. And at the moment, it's now one big network of people. So we can assume that they are from one group. Right. So where's the other one? And that's all the voices that aren't heard. And I'm sure that's not just me. Don't get me wrong. But it's those people that aren't on Fox News and they're not on News Nation and they're not in the New York Times and stuff because they're not in the right group.
You're right. Right. They're not on Joe Rogan. Right. And
they're not on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, but
I still aim to. That is my aim though, to get on Joe Rogan at some point. I don't know if it happens because it's Spotify money and all the rest of it. So we'll see. But I think that one, even then, he has platformed people that are lesser known, and that have done
that's
a lot
true.
less,
Yeah, he would actually. Yeah. He's
which is weird.
He's genuinely curious about the truth, and
Graham Hancock wrote the forward to my book. He's best one of his friends.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, nice. I was going to bring him up actually. When he made that Netflix series, it's called Ancient Apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when that came out, I started seeing. I hadn't even watched the show, heard of it, anything, but I started seeing all of these articles online saying, Hancock fraud, Ancient Apocalypse, fake, all this stuff, and I was
racist.
Like, what? Right, yeah, sure. They had all the buzzwords trying to tear it down, and I was shocked when I went and watched the series on Netflix. I go, what about this is fake? He's bringing scientific evidence, to the discovery of ancient humans, and my long-winded point is there is clearly an effort to tear down anything that goes against the narrative.
Yeah, they want to keep us in here. They want to keep us in here.
Knives out for him, absolutely. Just for wanting to rewrite that early part of civilization, the idea that there was some other culture that was already quite advanced, and that there's these catastrophes and things that happen. That even that is, if even that is so for some reason so uncomfortable and sensitive, that there was all of that. You can consider how some of the things I'm saying might be a lot more uncomfortable. And like when I had an article that was written about my forgotten Exodus, right? That was in Forbes. That was up on Forbes's website for about, I think, 3 hours before it was taken down, because there'd been a group, I think it was a group of scientists had pressured Forbes to delete the article.
Unbelievable.
Right? Unbelievable. And like someone actually said, one of those guys, and I probably said, obviously if they were so sure you were wrong, they could have just debated you.
Exactly. Refute it.
Right. But they wanted it took down. And this was nothing about aliens. This was just questioning the reason out of Africa and showing that this is wrong, that this origin story is all wrong. And it was so, you can't go there. This is core dogma. This is our belief system. It's out of Africa. Shut up. Take it down. And they took it down. So, if they're willing to censor me on that, I don't think, Fox News me queuing up to talk to me about aliens making us and stuff. So it's gonna have to be sort of grassroots.
We definitely need to get and we definitely need to get this narrative out, or this side of the story out more. And the good news is there's a lot of as you can see, there are so many podcasts about this in this space right now. Everyone is popping up, and this why not offer another narrative? Because there's also a lot of skepticism about what's going on, because people still see that there's something strange happening, so people do need another narrative, another different evidence to this reality.
Mhm.
And I think you
And
offer that.
I encourage skepticism, and I encourage skepticism.
Yeah,
I nearly every other tweet, I'm telling people not to believe stuff, because
right.
and they shouldn't believe me either. They should actually look into it and see whether. First of all, I get it. You can say, like, does he seem like an honest person? Does he seem like someone you want to listen to? Like, yes, we have to make human judgments, but beyond that, then to actually look and say, like, are the things he's saying, at least the ones that are checkable, are those true? Like, and has he made an argument about these objects and genetics that I can understand and see that there's some basis to it, and like also understand the argument. So the basic fundamental argument, again, I'll try and summarize, I know probably we're ending up soon, but like the way I look at this, again, I try and sort of simplify it for people to get to the end.
Let's summarize.
Like, if you think about it, look, if I said to you that I had a ghost in my house, like, let's just say I had a ghost, and he said, I am some, like 18th century prospector ghost from your town, and he tells me, let your friend know there's freaking gold buried at the tree at the bottom of their garden, right? So if I said to you, like, first of all, you say, like, no, I don't really believe in ghosts, or whatever, this just sounds wacky, you're making it up. But if you went and dug in your garden and you found a pot of gold by that tree, how would you feel about my story then?
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Right. You would then have to accept that there's a very, very good chance that what I'm saying is true, and that I had a ghost in my house and it has told me this checkable information that you've checked for yourself. It was extraordinary, I give you that, but you also had an extraordinary result. You've now got that pot of gold that I told you he told me about. And so you're holding it saying, shit, seems like ghosts are real. They can talk to people, that they can take you to real things. This is a real phenomena, and I should take it a lot more seriously. I would say it's exactly the same case. What I'm saying is that we are told that this intelligent artifact made contact with someone, told them this extraordinary story. No particular reason to believe it until when you check the things that it's claiming. In multiple cases where something can be checked, those things are true. At least they appear to be true. You can find physical things from what they are saying. And in these cases, those were things that could not be known by the person who received the message. They never even checked it, but they couldn't have, because those discoveries hadn't even been made yet. So they could not have cherry picked it. So that would suggest there's an intelligence with a higher view that knows stuff that we don't know, that knows things about our past that we don't know, and that has genuinely made contact with people and given them actionable information that they can check to do the first stage of a contact, which is to validate that they're real and that they're not trying to do anything harmful to us. They're just establishing trust at this point, just that they're real and that they can give you real information. They're not saying they're going to turn up tomorrow or invade, nothing else. That's it. We're just establishing that we've got a connection to you and that we're real. We can tell you things you don't know, and that years later, those things turn out to be true. There's no way they can be cherry picked. That is, I consider it stage one, where it's just confirming they're real and they have extraordinary knowledge, as they should do if they're a galactic civilization, right? And that's exactly what we expect. That's called to me, it's the gold standard of a paranormal contact case. It doesn't matter if it's a spirit or an alien. It has to give you actionable evidence that it's real and that you're in contact with an intelligence. It should know something you don't know. It should. If it's a spirit being or an alien, it should know things you don't know, because it's from some higher realm, right? So it needs to be able to do that. And that's why I think it's a cop-out when we hear all these different channelings or ghost hunts and stuff, because in the vast majority of cases, nothing like that is provided. And like all of these different people telling they're channeling aliens, why are none of them getting actionable evidence? Well, I say none, it's pretty unkind, but not that I know of, right? Let's say it's super uncommon.
It's entertainment, instead of trying to, it doesn't empower people. I think, this, the way you have gone about it is very empowering to people. And I do recommend people get your book and read it, and because it is, even when I read it, I was just it was, it's not just the easy writing, but it was so interesting just to see how the evidence, the way you laid it out was. And it's every time I would read a new concept, like, yes, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's undeniable. So I mean, do you have anything new coming out in the works?
Yeah, I'm working on like a podcast series at the moment with
Nice.
a documentary filmmaker. So the idea is we're going to start with a podcast and then hopefully pivot to making a documentary afterwards with probably some crowdfunding if people would like to see that happen. But initially, we'll do a podcast series, and then hopefully we can crowdfund a documentary presentation of the work as well. I also feel that, I do need to probably write an updated book to include new evidence that I've found, as I've carried on with the research. And in the long run, would love to be in all forms of media. I think it's an important enough story that if I could, it would be in like a comic book, it would be in documentary on Netflix, it would be in all forms of media, because I think it lends itself to that. Definitely it's a visual telling, because we're visual creatures, and seeing spaceships blowing up in the sky and asteroids coming down, it lends itself to that kind of production where it's not just just reading or just being told it. So I'm really keen to be able to have visual storytelling, because I also agree with you. I think this is an inspirational message. I think that we're being told that we have a cosmic connection, that we're not as the small species we thought we are, that we have a past that's way more exciting than we thought, but also it's telling us that perhaps we should be wary that galactic civilizations, maybe they don't all move beyond war and conflict. We should have in the back of our mind that maybe there's a bit more of a a problematic, complex ecosystem out there. And so again, it's also informing us about our environment, which I think is important. And it's telling us as well that we have the potential to be better than we are, and to develop abilities that we didn't necessarily believe we could, but that they're saying, we basically kind of engineered that you can, you just need to kind of go in that direction, that, you've been given what you need to break away from influences and manipulation, if you choose to do so. And it's telling us about a time we're in now, which again, there's funny elements. Back then there was a magnetic shift. We seem to be in the beginnings of a magnetic shift. Back then the AI was involved, and here we are with the AI again. There's sort of narratives that are coming back around of this, a great change, and so it's kind of funny. I think again, it's like, they say history doesn't repeat, but often rhymes. That it seems a bit like that as well.
Yeah, that's
back
very
into
true.
that moment again, where a lot of these kind of phenomena are kind of manifest, including, it seems, two factions of non-human intelligences.
Yeah, that's so true, and we're stuck in the middle of it. Unfortunately, one side has control of media, military, and corporate. It seems like, and the other side really is grassroots. That's coming from the people, which is, again, it's like always the same theme in a way.
Oh, absolutely. It's always the haves versus the have-nots.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably, I don't know if you caught it, but I did sort of tweet on that, that basically it seems like it's a collective of billionaires, academic scientists, media, and eccentric guy in his bedroom, stuff with his credit card.
Well put.
But it's kind of funny, but that it does seem like that, and I can only joke about it and still do the stuff because I feel that I have that one advantage, which is the collaboration of something else that has a lot more information on this situation than I do. Otherwise, I would fold my cards and leave the table immediately, because obviously I am outclassed in every way in this situation. So without that, I would just leave the table. Like any sensible person, you'd see the writing on the wall, right? And say, I'm done here. So the only reason why I have any confidence that we can still do this is because I recognize I've had assistance from something that is in a better position than I am to make this work.
And I guess you're mostly on X, right? So people can follow you on there. We'll put all of your links once we publish the show. So you're at Geological SETI, on X. Is that where you usually are? Or
there's people find me mostly there, and like I say, once I get done with the audio series, so obviously I'll let you know, and probably put that on there wherever we can promote that. And yeah, books on Amazon, of course. People can look at my work on Amazon.
Of course, yeah, we'll put
my
those
name.
links.
Yeah, so that's but mainly on X in terms of interactive, and if people want to ask me anything, and paper on ResearchGate as well on TechTites they can look at. So yeah, it's just all out there. And again, on my profile on X as well, people see there is a short documentary, and in the comments to that there's a presentation I gave, so they can kind of go through.
Oh, nice.
In the comments they'll find a few helpful resources sort of right there that will explain a lot of the backstory.
Nice. We'll share all that as well. Bruce, it's been seriously a pleasure and honor to have you on. Your insights into this crazy world and ufology and ancient history is really impressive, and definitely thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to apologize. I was not incognito for most of today's interview. My mic was not working and making a bunch of weird noises, and so I muted it. But I was still here. I was here the whole time.
Okay, no worries. I understand technical things happen.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, appreciate you guys having me on. It's nice. Yeah, appreciate you having me as the first guest, and I hope the first of many interesting guests for your podcast. I hope, and I look forward to hearing the show and sharing it onwards. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending what time you're in there.
Yeah, it's lunchtime almost now. Thanks you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Okay, take care.
See ya. This has been the Uncovering Anomalies podcast, episode 106. That is I Have a Need to Know Adam. I am Topher it all. You can find all the links to follow us, but more importantly, follow Bruce on X.
Absolutely.
And you'll find all of his publishings, everything you need to know. It's all in the show notes. Thank you all so much for listening.